Welcome to Fanfiction Audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any recommendation for novels, comment below. American Comics, Super Omega Mutant. Chapter 1, Mutant Card Drawing System. Marvel 1000086 Universe. New York. Midtown High School. Roy, who was sitting by the window, looked helplessly at the physics teacher on the podium, thinking about a very serious question. That's how he inexplicably traveled to the Marvel Universe, and went from being a college student in a flower-growing family to a senior at Midtown High School. As a college student who reads a lot of online novels, he is no stranger to time travel. But he didn't expect that time travel would happen to him. At this time, it had been almost half an hour since he came here. He digested the memories of his original body and figured out his own identity. His original name was Roy Chen. He was of Chinese descent and a second-generation immigrant. His parents were a lawyer and a doctor, and he was the only son in the family. Although her parents' social status was not low, she was not well received in school because she was of Chinese descent. To be precise, I don't have any close friends. As for the girlfriend, the original body was a typical virgin single. Judging from the appearance, the original body was not ugly and had a good figure. Although he is not as good as Daniel Wu, Nicholas Tse, and Yu Yan, it doesn't look out of place when put together with the three of them. In addition to figuring out his current identity, Roy also figured out a lot of other things. For example, this is a Marvel universe without mutants, Tony Stark is not Iron Man yet, Captain America Rogers died during World War II, the Avengers do not exist yet, and so on. If he only read these, he would feel like he had traveled to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But he was sure that he was not in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because his classmates now include not only Peter Parker, but also Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy, Michelle Jones, Harry Osborn, Flash Thompson and others. The heroines of 3 generations of Spider-Man appear in the same universe at the same time. No matter how you look at it, this is definitely not the Marvel Cinematic Universe. After knowing that this is not the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he realized that his prophet halo was lost by more than half. Although he has read some Marvel comics, he has not read many comics compared to movies. After taking a look at the time on his phone and knowing that the get out of class would end in less than a few minutes, Roy began to look for his golden finger. As we all know, every time traveler has his or her own golden finger. If there is no golden finger, it only means that the time traveler's good luck has been used up during the time travel. As soon as the idea of looking for the golden finger popped up in his mind, a system panel like a holographic projection panel appeared in his sight. Mutant Card Drawing System. Host, Roy. Loading card, none. Alternative cards, none. Number of draws, 1. System space, enabled. Along with the emergence of the system, instructions related to the system also appeared out of thin air in his mind. Mutant Card Drawing System, a system that can randomly draw mutant cards, with a free draw opportunity every month. After loading the card, you can gain all the abilities of the card character. A maximum of 5 cards can be loaded at a time. Cards that are not loaded will remain in the reserve card pool and will be loaded when needed. Roy was quite satisfied with this. He is interested in superpowers such as Mystique's transformation, Angel's flight, Red Devil, and Nightcrawler's teleportation, but he does not want to permanently possess mutant features such as blue skin, wings, and tail. Mutant cards are divided into 4 levels from high to low: SSR, Super Rare, SR, Super Rare, R, Rare, and N, Normal. Although he didn't know how many mutant cards the system had prepared, after figuring out the function of the system, Roy did not hesitate at all and immediately began to draw cards for the first time after the time travel. Do you want to start drawing cards? Yes. When Roy chose yes, a row of cards appeared in his sight. Magneto, Professor X, Phoenix, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Cyclops, Wolverine, Mystique, Storm, Colossus, Phantom, Nightcrawler, Darwin, the Swarm, Apocalypse. Before he could finish reading, the cards were turned over and rolled rapidly. After a few seconds, the rolling card changed from a row to one and stayed in the middle of his sight. Under his gaze, the card slowly turned over to the front. Wolverine. To be precise, it's SR level Wolverine. Obtain SR level Wolverine card. Do you want to load it now? Without any hesitation, Roy immediately chose yes. Loading card, SR Wolverine. As the card loaded, Roy instantly gained all the abilities that Wolverine possessed. Before he could properly experience the difference, the bell rang for the end of Get Out of Class. Jingle bell. Roy frowned immediately. The bell for the end of Get Out of Class, which originally didn't sound harsh, now seemed extremely harsh. Soon, he found out what was going on. The SR Wolverine card installed in it significantly enhanced his hearing and sense of smell. As soon as the bell rang, the physics teacher at the podium left the classroom without looking back, and the originally quiet classroom immediately became extremely lively. Roy's classmates also stood up and left the classroom in groups or individually. Soon, he was the only one left in the spacious classroom. When everyone else left, he turned his back to the classroom door and used Wolverine's superpowers. Laugh. 6 silver-white adamantium bone claws immediately appeared in his sight. Looking at the sharp adamantium bone claws shining with silver light, Roy showed a satisfied expression. Although Wolverine only acquired the adamantium bone claws after undergoing experimental transformation, the system has made it clear that after loading the card, he can obtain all the abilities of the card character. Compared with the original bone claws, the adamantium bone claws are much stronger. In other words, Wolverine with adamantium is the real Wolverine. Roy put away the adamantium claw with a satisfied look on his face, stuffed the textbooks on the table into his backpack, and left the classroom happily. Although Wolverine is not the most powerful mutant, the SR Wolverine card he carries gives him a great sense of security when he first crosses over to this world. Leaving the classroom, Roy headed to his locker as he remembered. It's lunchtime. However, he did not plan to go to the school cafeteria immediately. It didn't take much effort for him to find his own locker, or to be more precise, his original body's locker. Next to his locker, a white couple ignored the students around them, hugged each other, and exchanged saliva passionately. Roy ignored them and used his key to open his locker, stuffing the textbooks in his backpack inside and taking out the textbooks he would use in the afternoon. After placing his afternoon textbooks into his backpack and closing his locker again, he headed towards the school cafeteria. He had not walked far when an unpleasant voice came from behind him. "Are you going to have lunch, Lawyer Chen? We have prepared it for you." Although his back was turned, he immediately recognized the person who was speaking. Philip Salem. A member of the Midtown High School fraternity. One of the people the original body least wanted to meet. The reason why it is one of them and not the only one is because Philip Salem is not the only one who bullies the original body in school. Roy turned and looked at Philip Salem, who was speaking. Philip is black, and his friends are also black. Not only that, they are members of the school's football team and are also members of a black fraternity. After seeing the unhappy expression on Roy's face, Philip said in an exaggerated tone and expression, "Wow, Lawyer Chen is not going to sue me for intentional injury, right?" Intentional injury? No, it's not you who is going to intentionally hurt others, it's me. Roy threw his backpack aside and looked calmly at Philip, who was about 1.9 meters tall and often bullied his original self. "If you want to hurt someone intentionally, how can a loser like you hurt?" Bang! Before Philip could finish his words, Roy's fist hit Philip's left cheek. Although neither he nor his original self has learned fighting, it doesn't matter, Wolverine knows how to fight. Wolverine not only knows how to use several different fighting styles, but he is also proficient in them. Roy didn't use his full strength. At this time, he was still unsure of how much power he had after loading the SR Wolverine card, so he only used a small part of his strength. However, even so, Philip was still knocked down by his punch and fell to the ground with a thud. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. That year I hold my head in my hands. Chapter 2. That year I hold my head in my hands. No one except Roy expected him to take the initiative. Not only that, Philip's followers and other students in the corridor never expected that the tall Philip would be knocked to the ground by Roy's punch. Especially Philip. After being hit by Roy's fist, he immediately felt an intense pain that he had never experienced before. Before he could react, he fell uncontrollably to the ground, feeling as if he had been punched by a heavyweight professional boxer. How can this be? After seeing Philip being knocked down by Roy's punch, Philip's companions and the students around him all showed surprised expressions. Although the original body was not very popular in school and did not even have a good friend, most of the students at Central City High School were familiar with him. The school bully is very famous in the school. The guy who was bullied by the school bully was also very famous. After knocking Philip down with a punch, Roy didn't show any mercy to Philip and kept punching him. Bang 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 bang. His fists rained down on Philip. Philip, who had bullied the original body many times before, held his head in his hands, curled up his body, and endured Roy's fists like a human sandbag. After seeing this scene, Roy immediately thought of a sentence that could perfectly describe Philip. That year I held my head in my hands and was beaten so hard that I didn't know how to fight back. Although the person Philip bullied before was not himself, but his original self. But after recalling the memory of Philip bullying his original self, Roy decided to give his original self some revenge. After seeing Roy pinning Philip to the ground and beating him up, Philip's followers quickly recovered from their surprise and rushed towards Roy, shouting and yelling. Although they have an absolute numerical advantage and rich fighting experience. But they were soon knocked to the ground by Roy, and lay on the ground like Philip, being punched and kicked by Roy continuously, making miserable howling sounds. Wolverine is not a powerful mutant, but his strength is not weak. In the official ability value table, Wolverine's strength is 4, and he can lift or bear weights between 800 pounds and 25 tons. Under the gaze of the surrounding students, Roy continued to beat Philip and others like a barbarian. The screams of Philip and others and the sounds of punching and kicking mixed together to form an alternative percussion music. Roy beat Philip and others for 2 or 3 minutes before the school teachers finally arrived. After seeing Philip and the others lying on the ground with blood all over their faces after being beaten by Roy, the teachers who came over, like the students around them, showed expressions of disbelief. "Stop!" Dean Harold snapped at Roy. Roy turned and glanced at him. Then he punched Philip in the head again. Bang! Philip, who was still able to scream, immediately fell into coma. After knocking Philip unconscious, Roy stood up slowly. Under the gaze of Harold and others, he took out a pack of tissues from his pocket and wiped the blood from his hands with a calm face. Although he didn't say anything now and didn't continue to beat Philip and others, Harold and others swallowed unconsciously after seeing the calmness he showed. At this moment, Roy gave them the feeling of a cold-blooded perverted murderer. Has he always been this good at fighting? When did he become so violent? Was he stimulated by something? Harold and the others looked at Roy, who was calm and somewhat abnormal, and questions popped up in their minds one after another. After several seconds, Harold pointed at several students in the corridor and said, "You guys, take them to the infirmary immediately." After that, he said to Roy, "Come with me to the principal's office." Roy shrugged indifferently, picked up the backpack he had thrown aside, and walked straight to the principal's office. A few minutes later, he met the principal, William Lambert, who was dressed in a suit, in the principal's office. After taking Roy to the principal's office, Dean Harold told William Lambert what he knew. William Lambert, the principal of Midtown High School, frowned immediately after hearing that Roy had beaten Philip and others alone in the corridor next to the lockers, leaving them bleeding. He didn't care why Roy fought with Philip and others. He didn't care how Roy did it. He was only concerned about one thing now, which was how to deal with Roy so as to satisfy the parents of Philip and others and avoid them complaining about him. Although Philip and his parents are just ordinary people, their social status is not as high as that of the original parents. But for William Lambert, Philip and his parents were more difficult to deal with than his original parents. As for the reason, it's simple. Because Philip and his parents are black, while the original body's parents are Chinese. Teacher Harold, please go out first. I will take care of Roy Chen's matter. William Lambert said to Harold. Okay, Principal. After saying that, Harold left the office. After Harold left, William Lambert looked at Roy with a serious expression and said in a cold tone, Midtown High School will never tolerate any school violence. Call your parents and ask them to come over to handle your withdrawal procedures. Also, discuss the compensation issue with Philip and his parents. Although the original body had not had much contact with the principal William Lambert before, Roy guessed that he would say these words when he went to the principal's office. My parents are traveling around the world and won't be back anytime soon. Besides, I don't plan to drop out of school, let alone compensate Philip and the others. Roy looked at William Lambert calmly and spoke slowly. Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, William Lambert raised his right hand and slammed the desk hard. I'm not discussing with you, I'm informing you. William Lambert said quickly. I am also not discussing this with you, but informing you. Roy replied. Notify me, what qualifications do you have to notify me? Don't think I won't fire you just because your parents are lawyers and doctors. I'm the principal of Midtown High School, and I have the final say here. William Lambert stood up, put his hands on the table, and spoke loudly to Roy in a roaring tone. Roy ignored William Lambert, slowly took out his cell phone from his pocket, turned on the recording function, and gestured to William Lambert. Then, he put the phone on the desk and said calmly, Keep talking, speak louder. Looking at the phone on the table, William Lambert, who had been roaring loudly just now, immediately became quiet and glared at Roy. Since you won't tell me, let me tell you. Midtown High School Principal William Lambert condones students' bullying of minorities, accepted bribes from students' parents, and had improper relationships with several married female teachers in the school. Before Roy could finish his words, William Lambert snatched the phone from the table and turned off the recording function. You are making a false accusation without any evidence. William Lambert exclaimed. Whether it is a false accusation or not, it doesn't matter even if you tell me. If you think I'm framing you, Principal William, then call the police. I don't need to tell you what the number is. Unlike the furious William Lambert, Roy is as calm as he can be. While beating up Philip and the others, he had already thought about how to deal with what happened next. End of this chapter. Chapter 3 Invitation. Chapter 3 Invitation. Did his parents teach him? Or did he think of it himself? He wasn't like this before. One guess after another flashed through William Lambert's mind. Although he didn't know why Roy, who had always been timid before, suddenly became like this, he was sure of one thing, that is, Roy was not so easy to fool. After a dozen seconds of silence, he put the phone with the recording function turned off back in front of Roy, sat down again, picked up the cup next to him and took a sip. Then, he continued, Philip and the others did some excessive things in the past, but you beat them up like that today, and in front of so many classmates. I can't just pretend that nothing can happen. As soon as William Lambert finished speaking, Roy's voice rang out. I'm not in the mood to beat around the bush with you, nor am I interested in talking nonsense with you. I will not accept any punishment, nor will I make any compensation to Philip and others. If you insist on using your career and reputation to help Philip and his friends get justice, then I don't mind playing a big game with you. After saying that, Roy ignored William Lambert's grim expression, left the principal's office without looking back, and walked towards the cafeteria. Midtown High School's lunch period is only 1 hour, from 12 noon to 1 p.m. He wasn't going to go to his afternoon classes on an empty stomach. The schedules of American high schools are not exactly the same and are arranged by the region and school. Take Midtown High School, for example. Classes at Midtown High School begin at 8 a.m., with a 1-hour break at noon, and end at 2:45 p.m. There are about 4 to 6 classes per day, and each class lasts 45 to 90 minutes. On the way to the cafeteria, Roy stopped by the toilet and washed the blood off his hands. Although he had wiped it with a tissue, it was not wiped very clean and there was still some blood smell on his hands. Not long after, he arrived at the cafeteria. As soon as he entered the cafeteria, many eyes were focused on him. As a marginal figure and nobody in the school, this was a salute of attention that the original person had never experienced before. When he went to the principal's office to negotiate with William Lambert, the news that he beat up Philip and others in the corridor spread wildly throughout the school. No one would have thought that he, who used to be timid and dared not resist when bullied, would have such a violent side. They had never expected that he, who was not particularly strong, could beat Philip and others so hard that they fell to the ground wailing with blood all over their heads. Roy ignored their glances and whispers and went straight to the food window. Pasta, juice, sandwiches, apples. Holding the food tray, he found an empty seat and sat down, enjoying his lunch leisurely. Not long after, he finished his lunch and prepared to leave the cafeteria. Not long after he stood up, 5 or 6 black men stopped him. Like Philip and others who were beaten up by him, the 5 or 6 black people in front of him were also members of the school football team and the black fraternity. The leader, Trian, is Philip's cousin. After stopping Roy, Trian, who was shorter than Philip but stronger, looked at him ferociously, as if he wanted to eat him alive. Then, without saying anything, he raised his hands and grabbed at him like a runaway gorilla. Of course Roy would not sit there and wait for the other party to catch him. The moment Trian grabbed towards him, he raised his right foot. Bang! A standard and powerful kick hit Trian's lower abdomen, kicking him away. Although he was kicked away, he was not knocked to the ground by Roy. The black men behind Trian immediately supported him. However, before Trian could stand firm, Roy's right foot appeared in front of him again. Unlike before, this time Roy didn't kick him in the abdomen, but kicked him in the head. Bang! Trian was caught off guard and fell to the ground, unconscious. If you also want to lie down in the infirmary, I can help you. If you don't want to, then get out of my way. Roy ignored Trian who had fallen to the ground and spoke to Trian's companions. Although it wouldn't take much time to defeat them, he didn't really want to dirty his hands right now. Besides, he had just finished lunch. Do not do strenuous exercise after a meal. There is no need to affect your digestion and absorption of food for a few guys with strong limbs and simple minds. After hearing his words, the black men around Trian quickly exchanged glances, dispersed to both sides, and made way. Their relationship with Philip was not good enough to the point where they would help each other even if they were injured. Trian and Philip were relatives, but they were not. More importantly, Roy has proved with his actions that he is now a very capable player. After they made way, Roy left the cafeteria calmly under the gaze of everyone, as if nothing had happened. On the lawn outside the teaching building, Roy sat on a bench, thinking about his future life. The original body's parents went on a trip around the world and would not be back in the short term, so he did not need to worry that the original body's parents would notice anything wrong with him. Apart from that, the original body didn't have any friends at school, so he didn't need to worry about this aspect at school. He didn't think for long and made a decision quickly. Stay at Midtown High School. Wait until you have more powerful cards before considering other things. 2:45 p.m. The school bell rang on time. Putting his textbook back in his locker, Roy headed towards the school parking lot. I was originally an unpopular person in school and did not participate in any clubs or extracurricular groups. To be precise, no club or extracurricular group agreed to his application to join. After arriving at the parking lot with ease, Roy saw the original Ford Raptor. Although he was not very popular in school, because his family was relatively wealthy, as soon as the original body passed the driving test, his parents gave him a latest model, top-of-the-line Ford Raptor. For most American high school students, owning a top-of-the-line Ford Raptor is a very cool thing. Because this not only means that you don't have to take the school bus to go to school in the future, but it will also be much easier to pick up girls. The better the car, the prettier the girls you can pick up. This is an unspoken rule in American high school. Just as Roy opened the car door and prepared to drive back to his original home, a voice came from behind him. "We're going to Lassen Lake, do you want to come with us?" Roy turned his head and looked in the direction where the sound came from. The person who spoke was Jenny, the classmate of the original body. There were several other girls next to her. Jenny is a member of the school cheerleading team. She has a sexy body, pretty face, healthy wheat-colored skin and long wavy blonde hair. Jenny looked at Roy enthusiastically, waiting for his answer. In the past, she would never have thought of inviting Roy to go to Larson Lake after school. Now, she has changed her mind. In other words, she found Roy to be a good boyfriend candidate. He is handsome and his family is rich. Although I was a little timid before, I am different now. I am very manly. In Jenny's opinion, as long as she took the initiative to invite Roy, who had confessed his love to her before, he would definitely agree immediately. But it was obvious that she was overthinking it. If it were the original self, he would definitely accept Jenny's invitation without hesitation and drive them to Lake Larson with a happy look on his face. Not interested in. After looking at Jenny and the others, Roy refused without a second thought. End of this chapter. Chapter 4 Hell and Number 039, S Kitchen. Chapter 4 Hell's Kitchen. If it was Gwen or Mary Jane who invited him now, Roy would consider whether to accept the invitation. As for Jenny, he had no interest in her at all. Although the original body liked Jenny, and foolishly confessed to her, hoping that she could be his girlfriend. But he is not the original person. God knows if Jenny is a biological mother. Some cars may look 90% new on the outside, but it is hard to say whether the interior is actually 90% new. Even if the interior looks bright and beautiful on the surface, there is no way to guarantee that it will not emit toxic gases that endanger the driver's health. Jenny never expected that she would be rejected by Roy, and an expression of surprise appeared on her face. Just as she was about to say something else, Roy closed the car door and drove the Ford Raptor out of the parking lot. After driving for about half an hour, Roy returned to his original home. The original home was located in an upscale community in Queens, and all the residents in the community were high-income families. The community environment is clean and tidy, and the public security is very good. After parking the car in the garage, Roy came to the living room. The original person's family did not have a live-in nanny. It's not that they can't afford it, but the original family doesn't like a live-in nanny. Although he already knew what the situation at home was like from his original body's memory, Roy still wandered around the house. After touring the living room, bedroom, study, kitchen, basement, garage, garden, swimming pool, etc., he returned to his original bedroom. The bedroom where the original person lived was not small, about 20 to 30 square meters, and was very neatly arranged. Putting his backpack away, Roy sat down on the chair and opened the laptop on the table. Although he has digested the memories of his original body and knows that this is not the movie universe, he still feels that he needs to understand this world more deeply. Stark Industries, Osborne Industries, Alchemy Corporation, SHIELD, Hell's Kitchen. At the same time, an ordinary neighborhood in Queens. Inside a residential building, Philip, with a bandage on his head and a bruised face, and Trian, who was suffering from dull pain in his lower abdomen and head, sat on the sofa in the living room, angrily telling other people in the living room the whole process of their injuries. When the two of them finished their stories, Melita, who was several times fatter than them, quickly said, "Complain about Central City High School. We must complain about Central City High School. Philip and Trian are both good and obedient children. We can't just watch others bully them." Melita is Philip's mother, a typical black woman with typical appearance, dress, and thinking. As soon as Melita finished speaking, she was recognized by others, and voices came one after another in the living room. "No, I don't want to file a complaint against the school." When Melita and the others were extremely excited and wanted to make Central City High School and Roy pay the price, Philip's voice rang out. Although he was also very angry, he did not intend to resolve the matter by complaining. After hearing what was said, Melita quickly said, "No, we must file a complaint against them and ask that yellow-skinned guy to compensate us. I don't want him to pay compensation, I want him to know how miserable it would be if he offended me." Philip interrupted Melita and spoke quickly. Without waiting for Melita and the others to continue talking, Philip said to Trian, who was sitting next to him, "Let's go find Uncle Castor and let him teach that kid a lesson." "It is good." Trian replied without any hesitation. "The Castor they are talking about is their uncle and also their idol. There are many gangs in New York. The Magic Gang is one of the best gangs in New York, and its leader is Joseph Hammerhead Harrow, a well-known figure in the underworld. Although Castor is a small leader in the Magic Gang, in the eyes of Philip and Trevin, Castor is the pride of the family. In their opinion, there was nothing that Castor could not solve. As long as they go to Castor, Castor will definitely help them get revenge." Just as Philip and Trian were about to get up and look for Castor, Melita said to them, "You don't have to go. After I found out that you were beaten up in school, I called him and he will be here soon." Philip and Trian looked at Melita in surprise. Before they could say anything, Melita continued, "I originally wanted to make that yellow-skinned guy pay for it first, and then let Castor help you vent your anger. Now that I think about it, it would be better to vent my anger first and then make him pay. With Castor's presence, he can also pay more money." After listening to Melita's explanation, Philip said with a smile, "I have been eyeing that guy's car for a long time. I want him to compensate us for the car." After saying that, he imagined in his mind the beautiful scene of driving the latest top-of-the-line Ford Raptor and picking up one beautiful girl after another. At this time, Roy didn't know that Philip and his gang were planning to let Castor, a small gang leader, to cause trouble for him, and he was browsing the intelligence that he was interested in on the dark web. However, even if he knew, he wouldn't take it to heart. After digesting the memories of his original body, he knew that Philip had an uncle who was a small leader of the Magic Gang. When he bullied the original body in the past, Philip often used this point to threaten the original body. Although the original body was very afraid of Philip's underworld uncle, Roy was not afraid at all. Not to mention that he has now loaded Wolverine's card and gained Wolverine's abilities. Even if not, he would not be as timid as his original self. Perhaps it was because he had become a time traveler, or perhaps it was because his current body was not his own, but after traveling to this world, Roy felt like he was playing a game. He knew this wasn't a game, and he also knew he couldn't save the game and start over, but he still had this mentality. Time flies. Before we knew it, night had fallen. After searching for intelligence on the internet for several hours, Roy got up and left the bedroom, went to the kitchen on the first floor, and prepared dinner for himself. There are a lot of ingredients in the refrigerator in the kitchen. When my parents started traveling around the world, I started cooking for myself. Although the original body and Roy's cooking skills were not very good, they had no problem making a simple Western dinner. Grilled steak, vegetable salad, pasta. Soon, Roy prepared his first dinner since traveling to this world. After dinner, he went to his original body's bedroom, picked out a few new sets of clothes and shoes that he had never worn, and put them into the system space. Then, he took his wallet, keys, and cell phone and left the residence. Instead of driving, he walked to the main road outside the community and hailed a taxi. To Hell's Kitchen. After getting in the car, Roy said to the driver. Hell's Kitchen? After hearing his words, the driver turned and looked at him. Although a little surprised, the driver didn't ask any more questions and drove towards Hell's Kitchen. After an intensive search this afternoon, Roy learned a lot of information on the dark web that his original self didn't usually pay much attention to. For example, there are masked vigilantes and ninjas in Hell's Kitchen, there is a hotel in Manhattan that specializes in hosting killers, and there are giant humanoid lizards in the sewers of New York. End of this chapter. Chapter 5 The First Killing. Chapter 5 The First Kill. Compared to the daytime, New York City is relatively less congested at night. Even so, it still took Roy an hour to reach the infamous Hell's Kitchen. He didn't know if it was his illusion, but after arriving in Hell's Kitchen, he found that the drivers had become more vigilant and careful. Although New York is a well-known international metropolis, it is undoubtedly the financial, commercial, cultural, and media center of the United States. But in Hell's Kitchen, highway robbery is not a particularly uncommon occurrence. Whether you drive or walk, as long as you arrive in Hell's Kitchen at night, there is a high chance that you will be robbed by gangsters. Seeing the driver's expression becoming more and more alert, Roy said to the driver, "Stop by the roadside." After hearing his words, the driver first showed an expression of surprise, then said nothing and immediately stopped the car on the side of the road. When the taxi stopped, Roy took out $50 from his wallet and handed it to the driver. Under the driver's puzzled gaze, he opened the car door and got out. Although the driver didn't know why Roy, who looked harmless and young, would go to Hell's Kitchen alone in the middle of the night, he didn't think much about it. He immediately started the car and turned around to leave Hell's Kitchen. More than 800 million people live in New York. It is normal to have some weirdos among such a large permanent population. After getting out of the taxi, Roy looked around. The original person was a second-generation immigrant born in New York, but the original person had never been to Hell's Kitchen. However, not having been there doesn't mean that I haven't heard of Hell's Kitchen. In New York, Hell's Kitchen is a well-known high-risk area. Not to mention a law-abiding good citizen like the original body, even ordinary thugs would rarely hang out in Hell's Kitchen. Although the original body had never been to Hell's Kitchen, Roy had already browsed the map of Hell's Kitchen in detail online this afternoon. It didn't take long for him to confirm his current location. At the same time, the nearby thugs soon discovered that he was a fat sheep who had come to them on his own initiative. Whether it's his dress, appearance, or figure, in the eyes of these gangsters, he is an absolute fat sheep. Although these gangsters didn't know who he was, they were sure of one thing: Roy had a lot of money. Roy noticed that these gangsters were looking at him with unfriendly eyes. But he didn't take it to heart at all. Not only that, he also took the initiative to walk towards the dark alley nearby. After seeing this scene, the thugs who had already decided to rob him quickly followed without any hesitation. Dim light, damp ground, pungent stench, garbage everywhere. Roy stood in the alley, looking calmly at the thugs who followed him into the alley and were about to rob him. There were 7 hooligans in total, aged between 20 and 30 years old. Their dress and demeanor were consistent with people's general perception of hooligans. I don't know if it was a coincidence or some other reason, but these 7 thugs were all black without exception. After seeing Roy looking at him and the others calmly, the tall gangster who seemed to be the leader, with a fake gold chain around his neck and a lot of metal jewelry on his body, making clanking sounds when he walked, and dressed like an underground hip-hop singer, walked towards him first. "Boy, take out all the valuables on you." The little gangster didn't waste any words and spoke directly. Roy didn't answer the other party. He clenched his fists and raised them slowly. After seeing him raise his hand, the gangster in front of him immediately laughed disdainfully. "Still want to resist? Come on, hit me here." The gangster dressed like an underground hip-hop singer pointed at his chest and looked at Roy with disdain. "Swish!" Roy said nothing and released his silvery, sharp adamantium claws. This. After seeing the adamantium bone claws he released, both the gangster standing in front of him and the 6 gangsters behind him all showed expressions of disbelief. Before they could react, Roy swung his right hand and stabbed towards the heart of the gangster in front of him. Laugh. The sharp adamantium bone claws pierced through the chest of the gangster in front of him as easily as piercing a cream cake, and passed through his body. Kill with one blow. The gangster dressed like an underground hip-hop singer was killed instantly after his heart was pierced by an adamantium bone claw. Is this what killing feels like? It's no different from killing monsters in the game. Roy thought he would feel uneasy, panicky, fearful, self-blaming, or happy, satisfied, and delighted. It turns out that he thought too much. After killing the gangster in front of him with his own hands, he didn't feel anything, as if he had not killed a living human being, but an ordinary monster in the game. Roy retracted his right hand and swung it casually, and the blood on the adamantium claw was wiped off completely. Then, his eyes fell on the other 6 thugs. Without any hesitation, he exerted force with his legs and ran towards the 6 thugs like a wild beast. When they saw him running towards them, several thugs immediately took out the pistols on their belts and pulled the triggers frantically. Bang 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 bang. Fierce gunfire suddenly resounded throughout the alley. Although these thugs' shooting skills were not very good, they still hit Roy several times at this distance. However, this still did not change their subsequent outcome. The moment he was hit by the bullet, Roy felt an intense pain he had never experienced before. However, the pain soon eased and finally disappeared completely. At the same time, the bullet that was stuck in his body was squeezed out by the wound that healed itself very quickly and fell to the ground. Roy didn't care at all about being shot. He quickly came in front of the 6 thugs and waved his adamantium claws like a real beast. He 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 he. In less than 3 seconds, the 6 thugs were chopped into pieces by his adamantium bone claws. The bloody remains went to hell hand in hand to report to Mephisto. The strong smell of blood soon overwhelmed the original stench in the alley, and the blood flowing everywhere made the already damp alley even more humid. After taking a look at the bloody scene he had created with his own hands, which looked like a slaughterhouse, Roy shook off the blood on the adamantium claw and put it away. The moment he knew he had traveled to the Marvel world, he prepared himself mentally to kill people and planned to start his first kill in Hell's Kitchen. He would feel a little guilty about killing innocent ordinary people. But not only did he not feel guilty about killing a gangster who did evil, and a black gangster at that, he even had a feeling that he was punishing evil and promoting good. If he had to say something he was dissatisfied with, it was that he didn't like other people's blood splattering on him. However, he had made preparations early in the morning and prepared clean clothes in the system space. After taking a final look at the murder scene he had created, Roy left the alley without looking back and began to head towards other streets. End of this chapter. Chapter 6 Daredevil. Chapter 6 Daredevil. In a block not far from Roy, a gang fight was taking place. Although the number of people involved in the fight between the two sides was not large, there were only about 30 or 40 people in total. But unlike the gangsters Roy had just killed, all the gang members in the fight, without exception, had guns in their hands. Bang 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 bang. The fierce gunfire sounded like firecrackers during the New Year, one after another, continuously. Amid the noisy gunfire, there were also some shouting and screaming. If it happened in other neighborhoods in Manhattan, the New York Police Department would immediately send people to the scene to arrest the gang members who were fighting in the streets. But this is Hell's Kitchen. Several gang fights occur here every day. Sometimes, there would be more than 10 or 20 gunfights in one day. Because of the special nature of Hell's Kitchen, the New York police turned a blind eye to the gang fights that occurred here. As long as these fighting gangs don't use heavy firepower to endanger ordinary people living in Hell's Kitchen, the New York police won't bother to pay attention to them. The most they would do is come afterward and take the bodies that no one had taken away to the morgue. Not long after leaving the alley, Roy was attracted by the sound of gunfire. Although he didn't know why the two gangs were fighting, eating melons is human nature regardless of race. After arriving at the fighting neighborhood, he stood at the corner of the street and admired the beautiful scenery in front of him with interest. Free America, gunfights every day. The gun battle dream of 300 million people. Roy had only seen similar gang fights in movies and TV dramas before. After witnessing this very American gang fight, he immediately felt that the trip was worthwhile. In addition, he also had the feeling that these gang members were terrible at shooting. Even though they were fighting fiercely and firing bullets like they were free. But the hit rate is pitifully low. In addition, their shooting movements are very gangster-like, and you can tell at a glance that they are from wild backgrounds. The fierce gunfight did not last long. Less than 5 minutes later, the gunshots became sparse. At the same time, the two gangs in the gunfight had a tacit understanding and began to retreat tacitly. After seeing them begin to retreat, Roy took out a quarter with President Washington's portrait on the front from his wallet and threw it casually. Before the coin hit the ground, he caught it with the back of his right hand and pressed his left hand on the back of his right hand. He raised his left hand and saw that the coin was heads. He immediately put the coin away and calmly followed the gang that was retreating from the right side of the street. Soon, he caught up with the retreating gang members. Perhaps their attention was focused on the car parked not far away, or perhaps they simply did not expect someone to attack them at this time. None of these retreating gang members noticed Roy following behind them. Swish! Roy immediately released his adamantium bone claws and stabbed at the back of the gangster at the end of the team. Laugh! The sharp adamantium bone claws easily pierced through the opponent's heart. After killing this unlucky guy, he attacked the second gangster without any hesitation. Laugh! Before the opponent could react, the adamantium bone claw chopped off the opponent's head. The sounds of heads falling and bodies dropping to the ground finally attracted the attention of other gang members. Who is this guy? What is that in his hand? Although Roy killed two of their companions, after seeing Roy, the attention of these gang members involuntarily stayed on the adamantium bone claws. At first, they thought Roy was holding 6 sharp daggers that shone with silver light. But soon they found that things were not as simple as they had imagined. Unlike the gang members who had a puzzled expression on their faces. When they turned around, Roy didn't hesitate at all. He exerted force with his legs and rushed towards them. After seeing Roy rushing towards them, the gang members raised their pistols and pulled the triggers frantically. Bang! 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 Gunshots continued to ring out, and bullets flew towards Roy at high speed. Roy did not dodge or evade, but rushed into the crowd like a wild beast. How can this be? When the remaining gang members saw that Roy not only did not fall down after being shot, but also ran faster, an expression of disbelief appeared on their faces. Roy ignored their shock and quickly came in front of them, waving his hands continuously. Shishikachichiki. The sturdy and sharp adamantium bone claws are like the scythe of the god of death, constantly reaping the lives of these gang members. One gang member after another fell, and the splattered blood dyed Roy's clothes red. The broken limbs and arms scattered all over the ground made the already not very clean streets even more bloody. Although he had no grudges against these gang members, Roy did not hesitate or feel uncomfortable when killing them. Killing is indeed not a good thing. But some people contribute more dead than alive. For example, these gang members he is slaughtering. From piercing the heart of the first gangster to opening the skull of the last gangster with his adamantium claws, the entire process took less than 20 seconds. Cool. When all the gang members were killed by his adamantium bone claws, Roy experienced the so-called pleasure of killing. In other words, experiencing the pleasurable feeling that comes with power. Shaking off the blood on the adamantium claw, he retracted the adamantium claw into his body. Just as he was about to leave the bloody slaughterhouse that he had created, he immediately felt that someone was secretly spying on him. Without any hesitation, he immediately looked around. Soon, he saw a man holding a short stick, wearing a hood and a red uniform on the roof of a residential building next to the street. Roy recognized him the first time he saw him. Daredevil. The person standing on the roof of the residential building was none other than Daredevil, who was blind but had his other senses greatly enhanced. He was proficient in close combat and mainly active in Hell's Kitchen. After seeing the information about the masked vigilante in Hell's Kitchen on the dark web this afternoon, he knew that the masked vigilante was Daredevil. However, he didn't expect that he would meet Daredevil when he first came to Hell's Kitchen, and was witnessed by Daredevil killing gang members. Although there were some minor surprises, after seeing Daredevil, he immediately gave up the idea of killing to silence the witness. If he was seen by other gangsters, he would kill them decisively to silence them and prevent them from exposing their identities. But that's not necessary for Daredevil. Daredevil is blind. Although Daredevil witnessed him killing gang members, Daredevil had no idea what he looked like. After looking at Daredevil for a few seconds and finding that Daredevil had no intention of attacking him, Roy withdrew his gaze from Daredevil and left without looking back. More than an hour later, Roy, who had changed into clean clothes, took a taxi back to his original home. After coming back, he immediately took off his clothes and went to the bathroom to take a shower. Although he had cleaned the blood stains on his body before coming back, and also disposed of the blood-stained clothes and changed into clean clothes that he had prepared early in the morning. But he didn't know if it was a psychological effect, but he always felt that there was a strong smell of blood on his body. After staying in the bathroom for more than half an hour, he returned to the bedroom wrapped in a bath towel, lay down on the bed, and reviewed his battle in Hell's Kitchen tonight. The killing efficiency needs to be improved. The attacks can also be more deadly. In addition, when killing someone, try to avoid having the blood splattered on yourself. Although having blood on your body is not a big deal, it is better not to get your clothes dirty if possible. After reviewing the game, Roy cleared his mind and soon fell asleep. End of this chapter. Chapter 7 Peter Parker and Number 039, S Reminder. Chapter 7 Peter Parker's Reminder. Inside a luxurious villa in Brooklyn, Joseph Hammerhead Harrow, the boss of the Magic Gang, is working hard on his blonde lover. As a gangster boss, Joseph Hammerhead has many lovers, whose ages range from 18-year-olds to charming women in their 30s. At this moment, the cell phone he had placed on the bedside table suddenly rang. The sudden ringing of the bell not only interrupted Joseph's fight, but also made him look unhappy. No man would like to be disturbed at this time. Joseph was certainly no exception. Pushing his blonde lover aside, he picked up his phone, answered the call, and said impatiently, "What's the matter?" "Boss, something happened. All of Castor and his gang who went to trouble the Devil's gang tonight were killed." The confidant on the other end of the phone said immediately. "All killed?" After hearing the report from his men, Joseph immediately frowned and continued to ask, "Tell me clearly what happened. Did we fall into the trap of the Devil Gang, or did that damn film do it himself?" We are not sure what happened exactly. What we can confirm now is that Castor and his men were not shot, but killed with a knife." Joseph's confidant replied immediately. "Killed by a knife? Could it be the Hand?" "Not them. There is no grudge between the Magic Gang and the Hand, so it shouldn't have been done by those crazy people in the Hand." After hearing that Castor and the others were killed with a knife, the first thing Joseph thought of was the Hand. Apart from the Hand, he couldn't think of any other underground force in New York that would fight with cold weapons like knives. In America, where guns are rampant, it is not difficult to get a gun. Not to mention gangs, even ordinary people have enough ways to get illegal guns from the black market. "Where are their bodies?" Joseph continued to ask. "I arranged for a few brothers to take their bodies back to the gang headquarters." Joseph's confidant replied immediately. "I'll be there right away." After saying this, Joseph hung up the phone without waiting for his confidant to answer. After taking a look at his blonde lover on the bed, he said nothing, immediately picked up his clothes on the floor and put them on quickly. Then, under the reluctant gaze of his blonde lover, he left the bedroom without looking back. It was around 7 a.m. the next day. After finishing breakfast at home, Roy drove the latest top-of-the-line Ford Raptor towards Midtown High School. Although it's not yet rush hour, traffic in New York is already showing signs of congestion. After driving for about half an hour, Roy arrived at Midtown High School before class. After parking the car in the parking lot, he walked towards the teaching building with empty hands. Unlike his original self who was used to carrying a backpack to school, he didn't really like carrying a backpack with him. Not long after, he entered the teaching building. Not long after entering the teaching building, he saw Philip, Trian, and others standing in the corridor. Philip, who was beaten badly, had a bandage on his head and obvious bruises on his face. As for Trevin, compared to Philip, Trian looked obviously better, with no bandage on his head and no bruises on his face. In addition to Philip and Trevin, Roy also saw their followers. Whether it was Philip or Trian, when they saw him, angry expressions immediately appeared on their faces. However, they did not come over to cause trouble for him, but stood there staring at him. Roy ignored them and went straight to his locker, opened it, and took out the textbooks he would need later. Just as he was about to go to the classroom, Peter Parker, who was a classmate of his original self but they had a very ordinary relationship, came to him. "Is something wrong?" Roy said to Peter. "Go home right after school. Philip and the others want to take revenge on you." Peter turned his head to look at Philip and the others and said in a low voice. Roy looked at Peter with surprise. He was not surprised that Philip and the others wanted to retaliate against him. But he didn't expect that Peter, who had a very ordinary relationship with his original body, would take the initiative to come and remind him. Besides, he was also curious about how Peter knew. Although Peter was not bullied like his original self, he still didn't have many friends in Midtown High School. As far as Roy knew, or to be more precise, as far as the original body knew, there were only 2 people in Central City High School who could be considered Peter's friends. One is the famous rich second-generation Harry Osborn. The other was Ned Leeds. Unlike the movie universe, Ned Leeds in this universe is not a fat man with black hair, but a fairly handsome blonde boy, whose appearance is closer to the image in the comics. "How did you know?" Roy looked at Peter with interest and spoke slowly. "I heard it from the fraternity guys. A lot of people in the fraternity are upset with you after you beat them up yesterday. They came to school today and told the fraternity guys that they would teach you a lesson after school." Peter looked at Roy seriously and said quickly. "Okay, I understand, thanks." Roy patted Peter on the shoulder and walked straight towards the classroom. Seeing his indifferent expression, Peter immediately frowned. Just as he was thinking about whether to continue reminding Roy not to be careless, Roy suddenly stopped, turned around, and asked him, "I heard from others that you like a girl in the class. Who do you like, Gwen, Mary Jane, or Michelle?" "What?" Peter never expected Roy to ask him this question, and an expression of surprise immediately appeared on his face. After a few seconds, he replied, "Who I like is none of your business, stop being so gossipy." After saying that, he turned and left without giving Roy a chance to ask further questions. "You're going the wrong direction. The classroom is on the other side," Roy said to Peter. "I know, I just need to go to the bathroom," Peter replied without turning around. Time flies. Before I knew it, the morning class was over. Noon. Roy came to the school cafeteria alone. After taking a look at the food in the window, he ordered a bowl of pasta and a sandwich, just like yesterday. As for drinks and fruits, he replaced it with Fat House Happy Water and bananas. Just like yesterday, he found an empty table, sat down and enjoyed the lunch in front of him. As a time traveler from a flower-growing country, the American food provided in the school cafeteria was not very much to his taste. But he has no other choice now. There are many Chinese restaurants in New York. But there isn't one near Midtown High School. Not long after he sat down, a girl with a nice figure, long burgundy hair, wearing brown boots, a denim skirt, and a tight t-shirt came up to him with a tray in her hand. The girl who came before him was none other than Mary Jane. "Can I sit here?" Mary Jane asked Roy. "Can." Roy looked up at Mary Jane and spoke slowly. After hearing his answer, Mary Jane immediately sat down opposite him. Before he could speak, Mary Jane continued, "I heard from others that Jenny invited you to go to Lake Larson yesterday, but you directly refused. Are you going to invite me to Lake Larson, too?" Roy asked rhetorically. End of this chapter. Chapter 8 Potential Stock. Chapter 8 Potential Stock. Lassen Lake is a public attraction located in suburban Queens. Many high school students in Queens like to go to Lassen Lake to date, socialize, or just hang out after school. I had also fantasized about taking the girl I liked to Lake Larson to do things that couples love to do. But until Roy took over the body, this matter remained in the original body's fantasy. After hearing what Roy said, Mary Jane smiled and said, "If I invite you, will you refuse me?" "It depends." Roy replied. "What's going on?" Mary Jane continued to ask. "It depends on whether I have the mood and time." Roy looked at Mary Jane calmly. Although Mary Jane is a well-known female character in comics and movies, it does not mean that he will definitely accept Mary Jane's invitation. Of the three heroines in Spider-Man movies, he is most interested in Gwen, then Mary Jane. As for Michelle Jones, he doesn't like black people, neither men nor women. Mary Jane looked at Roy for a few seconds, then continued, "Then I formally invite you now. Will you go on a date with me to Lake Larson this afternoon?" Roy didn't answer Mary Jane right away. He thought about it carefully and said slowly, "I have some personal matters to deal with after school, so I may not have time." As soon as he finished speaking, a look of disappointment appeared on Mary Jane's face. Just when she was about to say something, Roy's voice rang out again. "If you're willing to wait, you can wait for me in the school parking lot, or I'll pick you up at your house in the evening." Although he was more interested in Gwen, he didn't mind having a deeper conversation with Mary Jane. No matter what, Mary Jane is a beautiful woman with good looks and figure. "I'll wait for you in the school parking lot. What's your phone number?" The disappointed expression on Mary Jane's face disappeared immediately and she handed her phone to Roy. Roy took Mary Jane's phone and entered his own number. After a few seconds, the cell phone in his pocket rang. He had tested it last night and found that the phone could not receive any signal when placed in the system space. When Roy heard the phone ring, he immediately hung up and returned the phone to Mary Jane. "If I don't call you within an hour after school, you can go home by yourself," Roy said to Mary Jane. "It is good." Mary Jane looked at Roy with a smile on her face and replied immediately. Just like Jenny yesterday, she had no interest in her original self before. Although the original body was good-looking and his family was quite wealthy, his character was too cowardly. Women are creatures that admire strength. No woman likes a timid man. However, things became different when Roy beat up Philip and Trevin in public yesterday. Not only Jenny and Mary Jane, but other girls in Midtown High School are now quite interested in Roy. If we say that Roy was a junk stock that no one cared about and was unpopular before, now, he is a hot potential stock. Mary Jane had originally planned to contact Roy again in a few days. But when she heard from other girls this morning that Jenny had taken the initiative to invite Roy to go to Lake Larson and was decisively rejected by Roy, she changed her mind. Hands are fast, hands are slow. Although America is not a country of flower growers, it also has similar proverbs. In order to prevent Roy, who was already a potential stock, from falling into the hands of other girls, Mary Jane changed her original plan and decided to start pursuing Roy today. Putting away her phone, Mary Jane took the initiative to ask Roy various questions while eating the lunch in front of her. Roy knew why Mary Jane suddenly became so proactive. But he was not carried away by Mary Jane's enthusiasm and only answered some irrelevant questions. While he was chatting with Mary Jane, Philip and Trevin, who were sitting on the other side of the cafeteria, looked at him with hostility. Compared to Gwen, who is not only beautiful, but also a top student and has a better family background, Mary Jane is relatively less famous in Midtown High School. However, there are still many boys in the school who like her. Trayvon is one of them. As for Philip, he was more interested in Gwen. Trevin had also pursued Mary Jane before. But Mary Jane did not agree to be his girlfriend. In addition to Trayvon and Philip, there are many other boys in Midtown High School who have pursued Mary Jane and Gwen. I won't talk about other classes. Flash Thompson, who was their classmate, pursued Gwen and Mary Jane successively. However, like Trevin and others, Flash Thompson also failed. As far as the original body knows, both Gwen and Mary Jane are single now. As for whether they have boyfriends outside of school, that is not something the original body can know. After seeing Mary Jane, who had rejected him before, take the initiative to find Roy and sit down with Roy to have lunch with him with a warm face, Trion's desire to kill Roy became stronger. In his opinion, Roy was able to have lunch with Mary Jane and chat and laugh because he got this opportunity by humiliating him and Philip. Otherwise, the person sitting opposite Mary Jane should be him, not Roy. After glaring at Roy for a few seconds, Trion retracted his gaze, turned to Philip and said, "Will Uncle Castor arrive on time this afternoon?" "Probably so." Philip replied somewhat uncertainly. After noticing that Philip's tone became uncertain, Trion immediately frowned and continued to ask, "Didn't you call Uncle Castor today?" "Of course I did. I called him a few times before coming to school, and I called him a few more times before coming to the cafeteria. But he didn't answer, nor did he reply to my message." Philip replied quickly. For some reason, after hearing Philip's answer, Trion suddenly had a bad feeling. Could something have happened to Uncle Castor? This thought flashed through Trion's mind unconsciously. Yesterday afternoon, at Philip's house, they met Castor, a small leader of the Magic Gang. After learning the details of the incident from them, Castor agreed to help them get revenge without hesitation. Not only that, Castor also promised them that after they graduated, he would bring them to join the Magic Gang and let them follow him to enjoy the best of life. For ordinary students, joining a gang after graduation is a very unwise thing to do. But in the eyes of Trion and Philip, being in a gang is much more fun than going to college. "Call Uncle Castor again before school. If he doesn't come, we'll do it ourselves. Maybe Uncle Castor is testing whether we have the ability to seek justice on our own." After thinking for a while, Trion said to Philip, "Just the few of us?" Philip frowned immediately. "Don't worry, I'll go find the fraternity guys later. There are also a lot of people in the fraternity who are unhappy with that kid. They probably wouldn't mind giving us a hand." Trevin continued. After hearing that Trion was going to ask the Brotherhood for help, Philip nodded immediately, "Okay, let's do as you say." Lunchtime was over quickly. Roy and Mary Jane headed to their afternoon class together. After arriving at the classroom, Roy sat down by the window at the back of the classroom as he did before. As for Mary Jane, she declined the invitations of the other girls and sat down on his right. Although she didn't say anything, when the other students in the class saw her sitting next to Roy, they guessed what she was planning, and immediately many of them started whispering and discussing in low voices. Lightning Thompson, who had pursued Mary Jane before but failed, immediately frowned when he saw this scene and looked at Roy with a bad expression. Jenny, who was rejected by Roy yesterday, also frowned at this time, and her eyes fell on Mary Jane. In addition to the two of them, many people's eyes fell on Roy and Mary Jane. For example, Peter Parker, Harry Osborn, Gwen, and others. Roy didn't pay attention to their stares, thinking about how Philip and Trevin would retaliate against him this afternoon. Are you planning to call on the fraternity to use your numbers to bully the minority? Or should we call their uncle who is involved in gangsterism? At this time, Roy didn't know that Castor, Philip, and Trian's backer, had been stabbed to death by him with his adamantium bone claws last night. End of this chapter. Chapter 9 Make a Settle. Chapter 9 Make a Settle. Mary Jane, who has dreamed of becoming an actress since she was a child, likes the feeling of being watched by everyone. Although there are usually many boys secretly looking at her, especially when she wears sexy clothes that show off her graceful curves. But that wasn't all she wanted. In addition to the stares and attention from boys, she also hopes to gain the envy and jealousy from girls. Time passes little by little. 2:45 p.m. The school bell rang on time. As the school bell rang, the students who had been looking forward to the end of school left the classroom all at once, and the originally quiet school suddenly became extremely lively. Roy and Mary Jane left the classroom together and headed toward the hallway where their lockers were. Not only that, Mary Jane took Roy's right arm proactively and pressed her seductive body against him. After seeing this scene, Peter, who was following Roy and Mary Jane, showed a strange expression. Don't look at it. Mary Jane is not a girl you can handle. Ned Leeds, who was next to Peter, spoke up. I never meant to get Mary Jane, I just... Before Peter could finish his words, he was interrupted by Ned. I just didn't expect Mary Jane to be so proactive and enthusiastic, or didn't expect her to like Roy. As Peter's only two friends at Midtown High School, Ned understands Peter better than anyone else. Besides, he also knew that Peter had once been very fond of Mary Jane. In other words, Peter, who had been a classmate of Mary Jane since elementary school, liked Mary Jane very much before he entered high school. As for now, Peter has fallen in love with another girl. No, I'm just a little curious about what happened to Roy. Don't you think he has become a different person since yesterday? Peter said with a frown as he looked at the backs of Roy and Mary Jane. People are going to change. You know how Philip and his friends bullied him in the past. My father once told me that you should never push an honest person into a corner. Otherwise, he may not even have the chance to apologize. Ned said seriously. No, I don't think he was pushed into a corner. I always feel that he is a completely different person now than he was before. Peter said slowly. After hearing his words, Ned shrugged and continued, never mind him. I found a good place yesterday. I'm sure you will be interested. After saying that, Ned raised his right hand and placed it on Peter's shoulder, then led Peter towards the student lockers on the other side. It wasn't long before Roy was in front of his locker, opened it, and stuffed his textbooks inside. As soon as he closed the locker door, Mary Jane, who was standing next to him, said to him, Philip and Trevin are here with the fraternity. After hearing Mary Jane's words, Roy turned and looked at Philip, Trevin, and others. Wait for me in the parking lot. Roy looked at Philip and the others calmly, and said to Mary Jane. Mary Jane nodded and immediately headed for the parking lot. Soon, Philip and the others came in front of Roy. If you're a man, come with us outside the school and settle it. After coming in front of Roy, Philip, with the bandage still wrapped around his head, immediately said. Make it over? Looking at the confident Philip, Roy said slowly, it seems that the lesson I taught you yesterday was not enough. Since you want to play, I will play with you. Although Philip and his men were numerous and powerful, he did not take them seriously at all. A bunch of scum who have strong limbs but simple minds, not even gangsters, and usually only dare to bully ordinary students. Even if there are many of them, there is nothing to worry about. Philip said nothing more and turned to walk towards the school gate. Roy calmly followed them out of the school and came to a community park near the school. Because school was over, there were many Midtown High School students in the park who had not gone home. When they saw Roy, Philip, and his group coming to the park, they immediately guessed that something interesting was going to happen. After bringing Roy to a corner of the park, Philip and the others stopped. Then, another group of fraternity members came up with black bags and surrounded Roy. After opening the bag, Philip and his friends took out more than 10 baseball bats from it. Some of these baseball bats are common wooden bats, while others are aluminum bats and composite bats. Perhaps because they couldn't get too many bats at once, Philip and his team didn't each have a bat. Even so, it seemed completely sufficient to them. "Where's your uncle who's in the underworld?" Roy didn't care about the bats in Philip's and the others' hands. He looked at Philip calmly and spoke slowly. "I don't need Uncle Castor to come in person to deal with you." After saying that, Philip rushed towards Roy with the bat. Bang! Philip came in front of Roy, and before he could swing the bat in his hand, Roy kicked him in the chest, and he immediately flew backwards. "If I can't take care of you in 3 minutes, I'm incompetent." After kicking Philip away, Roy glanced at Trian and others and spoke quickly. After saying that, without any hesitation, he suddenly exerted force with his legs and shot towards the fraternity member closest to him. Seeing him take action, Trian and the others first cursed, then rushed up in a swarm, and the two sides immediately started fighting. Bang 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 bang. There were shouts, curses, screams, the sound of fists and bats hitting each other, and so on. At the beginning, the scene was a bit chaotic. But soon, the melee between the two sides turned into a one-sided beating. Although Roy was alone and had no weapons in his hands, he still quickly gained the upper hand. For him who had loaded the Wolverine card, the fate of Trian and the others was already determined. Not to mention that they are holding baseball bats now. Even if they are holding AK-47s, they are bound to lose. Under the gaze of the onlookers, the unarmed Roy beat Trian and the others single-handedly, causing them to bleed and fall to the ground wailing. In less than 2 minutes, Trian and the others were all knocked to the ground, looking at Roy in disbelief. During the melee, they hit Roy many times and hit him on the head with bats. But even so, Roy still acted as if nothing had happened. Not only that, they also found that Roy's fist was unusually hard. If Roy had nothing on his hands, they would have suspected that he was wearing brass knuckles. They would never have imagined that Roy, who seemed to be unarmed, possessed indestructible adamantium bones and super-strong self-healing abilities far beyond those of ordinary people. After beating them all down, Roy came to Philip. Then he raised his right foot and stepped hard on Philip's right calf. Click! A crisp sound of bone breaking was heard immediately, and Philip's right calf immediately became irregularly twisted. The next second, Philip let out a miserable scream. Roy ignored Philip's screams and walked towards Trian. Then, he stepped hard on Trian's left calf. Click! The same sound of breaking bones, the same screams. Trevin also experienced the severe pain caused by his calf being stepped on and broken. After breaking their calves, Roy selected 5 or 6 lucky ones and broke their calves one by one. The screams that came one after another resounded like a special symphony in the corner of the park where they were. After doing all this, Roy said to Philip and the others, "If there is a next time, it won't be as simple as breaking a leg." After saying this, he ignored Philip and the others and glanced at the onlookers nearby. Before he started fighting with Philip and the others, he saw several onlookers took out their cell phones and pointed the cameras at them. "Delete the videos and photos you took. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude to you." After hearing his words, the onlookers who were filming with their mobile phones immediately deleted the videos and photos they had taken. Under the gaze of the onlookers, Roy left the park with a calm expression and walked towards the school parking lot. End of this chapter. Chapter 10 Second Card Draw. Chapter 10 Second Card Draw. Midtown High School parking lot. Mary Jane stood next to Roy's car, waiting for Roy to come back. Although she didn't know where Roy and Philip had gone, her intuition told her that Philip and the others would not be Roy's match. However, she still unconsciously began to worry whether Roy would be injured. Just as she was daydreaming, Roy came to the parking lot and appeared in her sight. She finally breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that Roy was safe and sound. Although Roy is not her boyfriend now, she has begun to assume that she and Roy are a couple. When he arrived in front of Mary Jane, Roy said to her, "Get in the car." "It is good." Mary Jane didn't hesitate at all. She immediately came to the passenger side, opened the door, and sat in. "Seat belt." Roy's voice sounded again. "What?" Mary Jane was stunned for a moment. "Fasten your seat belt," Roy said again. Mary Jane looked at Roy in surprise, nodded, and fastened her seat belt. Although New York's traffic regulations require the driver and front passenger to wear seat belts, many young people do not take this rule seriously. In their opinion, wearing seat belts is something only old people do and it is not cool at all. Once Mary Jane had fastened her seat belt, Roy started the car and drove out of the school parking lot toward Lake Larson. More than 9 o'clock in the evening. Roy drove Mary Jane back home. The reason why he took Mary Jane back so late was not because Lake Larson was so particularly fun, but because he had done a thorough inspection of the car at Lake Larson. The car is 18 years old, almost new, 173 centimeters long, and weighs 54 kilograms. Although it is not a new car, it is in well-maintained condition, 99% new, with luxurious interior, engine in its prime, exhaust also new, engine noise average, original paint, seldom used, and no signs of violent driving or years of off-roading. Overall, this is a good second-hand car, but there is no need to buy it and take up a parking space at home. However, when you are bored, you can drive a few laps on the track to experience the speed and passion. Just like in the movie, Mary Jane lives in an ordinary community, her parents are divorced, and she now lives with her alcoholic father. On the way to send Mary Jane home, Roy specifically asked about her relationship with Peter Parker. Classmate relationship. Now she and Peter Parker are just classmates. Although she and Peter Parker have been classmates since elementary school, their relationship has been ordinary until now. In addition, Peter Parker is no longer her neighbor, but lives in another community with his uncle and aunt. After sending Mary Jane home, Roy drove towards his original self's home. Time flies. Before I knew it, a month had passed. During this month, Roy experienced what it means to be a school celebrity. In addition to Mary Jane, he also had intimate relationships with several other beautiful girls in the school that went beyond friendship. For example, Annie, the cheerleader captain of Midtown High School. Inside the classroom, Roy ignored the teacher on the podium and Mary Jane sitting next to him, and opened the system panel that only he could see. After waiting patiently for a month, he finally got his second chance to draw a card. Number of draws, 1. Do you want to start drawing cards? Yes. Without any hesitation, Roy decisively chose yes and started his second card draw. Just like last time, a row of cards immediately appeared in his sight. Magneto, Professor X, Phoenix, Cyclops, Phantom, Nightcrawler, Colossus, Storm. As he watched, the cards turned over and began to roll rapidly. After a few seconds, all the other cards disappeared, leaving only one card in front of him. He didn't need to do anything, and the card slowly turned over. After seeing the character on the front of the card, he smiled with satisfaction. King of Cards. Like Wolverine, he drew an SR-level King of Cards card this time. Obtain SR King card. Do you want to load it now? After seeing the prompt given by the system, Roy immediately chose to load. Loaded cards, SR Wolverine, SR Card King. As the King of Cards card was loaded, a lot of information about the King of Cards abilities appeared out of thin air in his mind. Even without the information provided by the system, he knew very well what superpowers the King of Cards had. The King of Cards has many superpowers. The most well-known is to inject energy into other objects to manipulate them or detonate them. The larger the object touched, the more energy is required, the longer the charging time is, and the more powerful the explosion is. For ease of use, the King of Cards usually charges small objects. For example, playing cards. When using cards, he can charge them instantly without any delay. In addition to the superpower of charging objects, the King of Cards also possesses superpowers such as mind isolation, hallucination, precognition, and physical enhancement. Mind isolation prevents telepaths from invading his mind and tracking his whereabouts. The psychedelic power gave him the ability to influence other people's consciousness, making them believe and agree with every word he said. However, psychedelic power has some weaknesses. First of all, psychedelic power needs to be triggered through contact or sound, and it is impossible to influence others silently like a telepath. In addition, if the other party knows that he possesses the superpower of psychedelic power, or is on guard against this type of superpower, the effect of psychedelic power will be weakened or even directly ineffective. As for precognition, it is a superpower similar to divination, and playing cards can be used to predict the future. Like many mutants, Gambit has also gained certain physical enhancements and has far superior agility to ordinary people, allowing him to dodge or catch bullets. In addition, his endurance and physical fitness are much stronger than ordinary people. In addition to these superpowers, the King of Cards can speak several languages, such as English, French, Japanese, etc. In addition, years of training have made him a master of free fighting and fencing, and he also possesses excellent throwing skills. Although Gambit is not as powerful as Magneto, Professor X, and others, Roy is quite satisfied with the result of this card drawing. In any case, the cards drawn this time are all SR level cards. It's good as long as it's not R level or N level cards. As a person, you should know how to be content. After loading the King of Cards cards, Roy turned off the system panel. Just as he was thinking about whether he should immediately find someone to test the psychedelic power that the King of Cards possessed, the biology teacher on the podium suddenly said, "Tomorrow morning, the school has organized an activity to visit the Columbia University Academy of Sciences. Everyone should not be late." Visiting Columbia University's Faculty of Science? After hearing what the biology teacher said, Roy showed a surprised expression. End of this chapter. Chapter 11 Spider Totem. Chapter 11 Spider Totem. When Roy heard his biology teacher say that they were going to visit Columbia University's School of Science the next day, the scene in Tobey's version of Peter Parker being bitten by a genetically engineered super spider at Columbia University's School of Science immediately emerged in his mind. On the surface, Peter Parker was able to become Spider-Man because he suffered a genetic mutation after being bitten by a spider. But in fact, he was able to become Spider-Man because he was chosen by the Spider Totem. Once chosen by the Spider Totem, one can connect to the web of life and destiny, thereby gaining extraordinary abilities based on arachnids, including but not limited to spider physical fitness, spider sense, adsorption ability, self-healing factor, etc. In addition, Spider-Man in different universes may also obtain some unique superpowers. For example, Spider-Man Miles Morales possesses extraordinary abilities that other Spider-Mans do not have, such as stingers, spider disguises, and energy bursts. Is he going to be chosen by the Spider Totem? Roy's eyes immediately fell on Peter. Although this is not the Spider-Man movie universe, he is still interested in visiting Columbia University's School of Science tomorrow. After noticing his eyes on Peter, Mary Jane, who was sitting next to him, asked him, "What's wrong with Peter?" "Nothing." Roy retracted his gaze and spoke slowly. Not long after, the bell for the end of Get Out of Class rang. Mary Jane immediately stood up and walked to Roy's side, heading to the cafeteria with him accurately. At this moment, Roy said, "You go to the cafeteria first, I'll go to the toilet." Mary Jane nodded. After coming out of the classroom, Roy first put his textbooks back into his locker. Then, he turned and walked towards the roof of the teaching building. Going to the bathroom was just an excuse for him to get rid of Mary Jane. Soon, he arrived at the empty rooftop of the teaching building and took out a brand new deck of playing cards from the system space. He first put the 2 Joker cards back into the system space, and then began to cut the cards in a dazzling manner. At the same time, he used the precognition granted by the King of Cards card and drew 4 playing cards from the deck. After taking a look at the suits and points of the 4 playing cards in the order in which they were drawn, he put the playing cards back into the system space, turned around, left the rooftop, and walked towards the cafeteria. The divination results show that there will be some unexpected surprises during tomorrow's visit. He couldn't predict what the surprise would be. The SR level King of Cards cards only gave him a certain degree of divination ability, but did not make him a master prophet who could accurately predict the future. After arriving at the cafeteria, Roy saw Mary Jane without much effort. Mary Jane didn't sit with the other girls, but found a table with not many people. When Roy saw her, she also saw Roy, and immediately raised her right hand and waved at Roy. Roy nodded and walked towards the cafeteria window. After ordering a few things casually, he brought the tray to Mary Jane and sat down opposite her. Not long after he sat down, Peter, Harry and Ned came to his side. "Can we sit here?" Peter, holding the plate, said to Roy. After looking at the 3 of them, Roy nodded, "Okay." After hearing his answer, Peter and the other 2 sat down. In the past month, Roy didn't have much contact with Peter and the others. However, compared to his original self, his relationship with Peter and the other 2 is relatively better. When they meet, they will take the initiative to say hello or chat for a while, unlike the original self who had hardly spoken to each other in the same class for several years. "I heard that Columbia University's Academy of Sciences has the most advanced electron microscope on the West Coast. I wonder if I can see it when I visit tomorrow." After sitting down, Peter said with anticipation. As soon as he finished speaking, Harry and Ned showed expressions of as expected. When the biology teacher said that they would visit Columbia University's Science Academy tomorrow, Peter showed strong interest. They thought that Peter would temporarily end the topic after arriving in the cafeteria. It turns out that they thought too much. "I also heard that Columbia University's Faculty of Science has been conducting research in the field of genetic engineering in recent years, trying to use synthetic RNA to create a completely new genome, thereby performing genetic recombination and improvement." Roy glanced at Peter and spoke slowly. "What?" After hearing his words, Mary Jane, Peter, and the other 2 all showed surprised expressions. When did he become interested in these things? This question flashed through the minds of Mary Jane, Peter, and the others at the same time. "Are you also interested in biological genetic engineering?" Peter asked immediately, as if he had met a rare soulmate. "I just happened to read some books and research reports on genetic engineering recently," Roy replied. In the eyes of others, he had lived a decadent life in the past month, from a good student who loved studying to a bad student who spent all his time picking up girls and having fun. However, it is not. In private, he is still a person who loves learning. Although the SR Wolverine card did not grant him super intelligence, due to his strong curiosity and thirst for knowledge, he still read a lot of professional books and research reports that ordinary high school students would not be exposed to. Biological genetic engineering is just one of them. In addition, he also browsed professional books and the latest research reports in fields including nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, clean energy, smart weapons, biomedicine, etc. Knowledge is power. When learning is no longer for the purpose of taking exams, it becomes a very fun thing. Although he didn't know whether he would draw a mutant card with super intelligence in the future, it was never a bad thing to learn more knowledge. In addition, spending time reading books is more cost-effective than spending time watching videos of beautiful girls. She is the most beautiful woman in the world. Even if you watch a beautiful woman's video 100 times, she can never be yours, but if you read a book 100 times, the knowledge in the book is yours. I have read some reports on genetic engineering before. If we have time, let's discuss it together. Peter said to Roy. It is good. Roy nodded. After seeing the two of them chatting about genetic engineering without paying attention to the people around them, Mary Jane and the other two showed helpless expressions. Hell's Kitchen. Inside an office at the Magic Gang headquarters. Hasn't the madman wearing a white mask and with steel claws growing out of his hands been found yet? Joseph, known as Hammerhead, looked at Dennis standing in front of him with displeasure on his face. Dennis is not only his confidant, but also one of the big bosses of the Magic Gang. When Castor and others who were fighting with the Devil Gang were killed, Joseph had a bad premonition. As it turned out, his premonition was correct. In the past month, many more members of the Magic Gang have been killed in the same way. We haven't found that guy yet. However, other gangs that he had offended, such as the Devil Gang and the Viper Gang, are also looking for him. In addition, the Hand is now searching everywhere for his whereabouts. Dennis, who was wearing a suit and had a scar on his face and looked like an ugly guy, replied quickly. The madman Joseph was talking about, who was wearing a white mask and had steel claws growing out of his hands, was none other than Roy. End of this chapter. Chapter 12 An Unexpected Surprise. Chapter 12 An Unexpected Surprise. Roy never thought about being a superhero, and similarly, he didn't plan to be a supervillain. However, he didn't mind earning some extra money from New York's gangs. The original Body's family was indeed a high-income family, but the original Body's parents went on a trip around the world and did not leave much money for the original Body, only a few tens of thousands of dollars. In order to make money, he targeted the New York gangs, and while he was robbing his fellow gangsters, he sent the scum in the gangs to hell with his own hands. Did he also offend the Hand? Joseph asked, frowning. Although they are all members of the New York underworld, the Hand is different from gangs such as the Magia and the Devil's Creed. The Hand not only runs some traditional gang businesses, but is also a killer group. To be precise, it is a crazy ninja killer group. Compared to gangs like the Magia and the Devil's Gang, the Hand is much stronger. In addition, the Hand also possesses extraordinary powers that ordinary gangs do not possess. Yes. 3 days ago, he teamed up with Daredevil to disrupt a drug deal of the Hand, causing the Hand to lose tens of millions of dollars. The Hand is now fully investigating his and Daredevil's whereabouts. But so far, there has been no news that the Hand will find them. Dennis immediately told everyone the information he knew. The information he had obtained was fine except for the fact that Roy and Daredevil had teamed up. Although Daredevil is undoubtedly a superhero, Roy did not team up with him. They just happened to meet each other that time when they sabotaged the Hand deal. To be precise, Daredevil's goal is to disrupt the Hand's deal. Roy was just looking for a target to rob a gang member when he happened to run into the drug dealer who was doing a drug deal. He recognized the Hand and the meeting, but he did not give up the idea of robbing the thieves. After killing all the Hand ninjas and drug dealers at the scene, the $10 million used for the transaction became his spoils. Daredevil doesn't want him to rob his fellow criminals, so he prepares to hand over all the drugs and stolen money at the scene to the police. It's normal for Daredevil to have such thoughts. After all, he is a superhero who fights crime and does good. But Roy is no superhero. In order to prevent him from taking the stolen money, Daredevil used all his skills to stop him. But in the end, Roy still left with the $10 million. Compared to ordinary people, Daredevil is indeed very strong. But compared to Roy, who is equipped with the SR Wolverine card, Daredevil is not that strong. If he hadn't retracted his adamantium claws at the last moment, Daredevil's heart would have been pierced by him long ago. After a silence of more than 10 seconds, Joseph said to Dennis, "Since the Hand is already doing its best to find that guy, there is no need to waste energy on looking for him. Notify everyone in the gang to keep an eye out for the lizard monster in the sewer. Someone is very interested in it and has offered a high reward." Just for providing accurate intelligence, there is $500,000. If you can capture him alive, there will be a reward of $30 million. $30 million? Hearing what Joseph said, Dennis immediately showed an expression of surprise. Although the Magic Gang is one of the most powerful gangs in New York, $30 million is still not a small sum for them. Compared to most legal businesses, underworld businesses are indeed more profitable, but it is not to the point where you can easily make $30 million. Okay, I'll immediately arrange for someone to find the whereabouts of that monster. Dennis replied immediately. The negatives, the Cobra, the puzzle, and the tombstone should have received calls as well. Tell the people below to be smart. I don't want to see the reward being snatched away by a few of them. Joseph continued. Okay, I know what to do. After that, Dennis left the office. The next day, Columbia University. Roy, who did not plan to take the school bus, drove to Columbia University in advance and parked his car in the parking lot outside Columbia University. Afterwards, he came to the square outside the Columbia University Science Center alone and waited patiently. Mary Jane wanted to stay overnight at his house yesterday, so it would be convenient for her to come with him today. But he turned Mary Jane down. Although he had had in-depth conversations with Mary Jane several times, he and Mary Jane were still not lovers, but poker friends. At least that's what he thought. After taking a taxi to take Mary Jane back, he used his precognitive powers again to tell fortunes with playing cards. The divination results are the same as at noon, both indicating that there will be unexpected surprises during today's visit. Although he still couldn't predict what the surprise would be, he didn't worry too much about it. If you know it in advance, it won't be a surprise anymore. After arriving at the square in front of the Columbia University Science Building, he had nothing to do, so he looked at the female Columbia students coming and going. Time passes little by little. After admiring the young and beautiful Columbia University female students for more than 10 minutes, he finally saw his classmates who came to Columbia University on the school bus. His eyes lingered on Gwen and Mary Jane before landing on Peter. Just as he guessed, Peter, who loves photography, brought his camera with an expectant expression on his face. Beside him were his only two good friends, Harry and Ned. After seeing Roy, Mary Jane immediately came up to him, took his right arm, and pressed her mature and attractive body against him. At the same time, the biology teacher who led the group said to everyone, "Don't run around, don't get separated, don't make trouble like you did when visiting a planetarium, and obey the rules of the visit." After saying that, the biology teacher turned and walked towards the science building. Following the biology teacher, Roy and his friends entered the laboratory in the science building and saw the electron microscope, which was said to be the most advanced on the West Coast. These spiders have different abilities that help them find food, like this one from Australia, which can catch its prey by leaping. And this web-building spider can weave a tough, funnel-shaped web. This spider can use reflexes to hunt. Its reflexes are god-level and very fast. Some researchers believe that it has the ability to predict danger and can sense it in advance, similar to the spider's sixth sense. Columbia University's School of Science arranged a female researcher to serve as a guide to explain things to Roy and his team. After entering the laboratory and seeing that the insects currently being studied by Columbia University's School of Science were spiders, Roy knew that either Peter Parker or Gwen would be chosen by the spider totem today. After 5 years of spider genetic research, we have successfully mapped the genetic blueprints of a large number of spiders and used synthetic RNA to create a new genome, combining the genes of several different spiders to create these 15 super spiders. The female researcher in charge of the explanation said with pride. However, just as she finished speaking, Gwen's voice rang out. "There are only 12 here." Gwen said to the female researcher. "What did you say?" The female researcher asked immediately. "There are 3 missing." Gwen said again. After hearing Gwen's words, the female researcher in charge of the explanation, and Roy frowned at the same time. 3 missing? Could it be that the unexpected surprise revealed by the divination is? A guess quickly flashed through Roy's mind. The female researcher quickly stepped forward and observed the breeding boxes of the 15 super spiders. Maybe other researchers took it for experiments. The female researcher said with a frown. Do not. It was not used to build a laboratory, but was jailbroken. Roy immediately complained in his mind. At the same time, he carefully observed his surroundings. After hearing Gwen say that there were only 12 super spiders in the breeding box, he knew what the unexpected surprise shown by the divination was. He was also chosen by the spider totem. To be more precise, the spider totem chose him, Peter, and Gwen at the same time. Although he has not yet found the 3 super spiders that escaped from prison, Roy believes in his judgment. Spider totems can choose any individual from any universe to be their incarnation, and there are no specific criteria for choosing the incarnation. The spider totem doesn't care whether the other party is good or evil, a god or a human. Once chosen by the spider totem, one will be bitten by the spider arranged by the spider totem, thereby gaining extraordinary abilities based on arachnids. Mary Jane, who was standing next to Roy, had no idea what he was thinking. However, she was keenly aware of Roy's changes and discovered that he was observing the laboratory carefully. End of this chapter. Chapter 13 Special Cards. Chapter 13 Special Cards. What happened? Mary Jane asked softly after seeing Roy looking around and observing the laboratory carefully. Nothing, just take a look. Roy, of course, would not tell Mary Jane that he was looking for the super spider who escaped from prison, and answered casually. After hearing his answer, Mary Jane was about to say something when Peter's voice rang out. Can I take some photos for the school magazine? Peter picked up the camera and asked the female researcher. Of course can. The female researcher nodded. After Peter took a few photos of the super spider in the breeding box, the female researcher took them to another laboratory while giving them an explanation. Roy sighed calmly and followed the crowd out of the laboratory. Although he had observed the corners and ceiling of the laboratory as much as possible, he still did not find the escaped super spider. Could it really have been taken by other researchers for experiments? Just when Roy began to wonder if he had guessed wrong, he discovered the first escaped super spider. It was a spider with black and white stripes, only the size of the fingernail of your little finger. It climbed onto Gwen's shoulder at some point, crawled into the collar of Gwen's coat, and disappeared from Roy's sight. Amount. After seeing this scene, Roy knew that his guess was correct. He had expected the fingernail-sized black and white striped spider to bite Gwen soon. However, after crawling in through the collar of Gwen's coat, the super spider did not bite Gwen immediately, as if the scene just now was his hallucination. The super spider didn't bite Gwen until the female researcher brought them to the second laboratory. Although he didn't know why the super spider didn't bite Gwen immediately, Roy didn't think much about it and checked himself calmly. No spiders on me. He didn't find any spiders on himself. Time passes little by little. Led by the female researcher, Roy and his team visited 7 or 8 laboratories in the Academy of Sciences building and successfully concluded today's visit. After the tour, the biology teacher led them out of the science building and walked towards the school bus of Midtown High School. You can take the school bus back. I have something to take care of, Roy said to Mary Jane. After hearing his words, Mary Jane's face immediately showed disappointment. Although she didn't know what Roy was going to do, Mary Jane didn't ask any more questions and nodded. See you at school this afternoon. After saying that, without waiting for Mary Jane to reply, Roy walked towards the parking lot outside Columbia University. It didn't take long before he arrived in front of his Ford Raptor. Just as he was about to open the car door and get in, he suddenly stopped his right hand that was reaching for the door handle. In the corner facing the door handle, he saw a little finger-sized spider that was blood red with dark blue stripes. When he stopped reaching for the door handle with his right hand, the spider that had been hiding in the corner inside the door handle crawled out and looked at him. What does it mean? Why don't you just come clean and stop pretending? Looking at the blood-red spider that was staring at him, Roy complained in his heart. After thinking for a few seconds, he stretched out his right hand towards the blood-red spider. When his right hand was only a few centimeters away from the blood-red spider, the blood-red spider on the door handle immediately jumped towards his right hand. However, at this moment, Roy quickly retracted his right hand and took out a small glass bottle with an air hole from the system space. Using the extraordinary sensitivity granted by the SR King of Cards card, he caught the blood-red spider in the glass bottle in his hand and put the cap on it in a flash. Get it? Although he did not expect that the blood-red spider arranged by the spider totem would be waiting for him here, he quickly made a decision after seeing the blood-red spider. Don't accept the power of the spider totem yet. Wait until the time is right, such as at night, and then decide whether to become the incarnation of the spider totem. Although doing so might cause the spider totem to abandon him, he didn't really care. Whether he has the power of the spider totem or not, it has little effect on him. After being put into the glass bottle, the blood-red spider did not show any signs of resistance or rampage. It stayed very quietly in the glass bottle, staring at Roy with its 8 small eyes. Because the system space could not store living things, Roy did not put the glass bottle back into the system space, but put it in his pocket. Then, he opened the door, got in the car, started the car, and drove towards Midtown High School. He had originally planned to use playing cards in the car to divine whether he was really chosen by the spider totem. As it turned out, he was indeed selected. However, unlike other Spider-Men, he did not let the spiders arranged by the spider totem bite him immediately. Night. After having dinner at a Chinese restaurant outside, Roy returned home and went to his bedroom. He sat down at the desk and took out a glass bottle containing a blood-red spider from his pocket. Although it had been locked up for an afternoon, the blood-red spider in the glass bottle was still full of energy. Not only that, after Roy took out the glass bottle, the blood-red spider immediately looked at him. After staring at the blood-red spider for more than 10 seconds, he opened the bottle cap and let the blood-red spider out. Then, he placed his right hand in front of the blood-red spider. Bite if you want, Roy said to the blood-red spider. Although the blood-red spider could not speak, after staring at it for more than 10 seconds, he knew that the will of the spider totem had not left the blood-red spider. Looking at the right hand that was so close, the blood-red spider that had been locked up for most of the day first glared at Roy, then turned around and crawled to the other side. Angry? A bit stingy. Seeing that the blood-red spider had no intention of biting him but was preparing to leave, Roy shrugged indifferently. When he put the blood-red spider into the glass bottle, he was mentally prepared that the spider totem would give up on him. It would be nice to have superpowers like Spider-Man. But for him, this is not an essential power. Possessing Spider-Man's superpowers is like having an extra Spider-Man card that is not in the system deck. If not, it's not a big deal. Roy ignored the red spider's departure and stood up and walked towards the bathroom. Perhaps it saw him leaving, or perhaps it was just being too arrogant. The blood-red spider that was crawling towards the edge of the desk immediately changed direction. Then, he leaped hard onto Roy and quickly climbed onto the back of his right hand. Roy discovered the blood-red spider just as it jumped onto him. However, he did not stop the blood-red spider. Coming behind his right hand, the blood-red spider bit the back of his hand hard without any hesitation. The next second after feeling the pain, Roy raised his left hand and slapped the blood-red spider to death. The wound caused by the bite of the blood-red spider disappeared in the blink of an eye, as if it had never appeared. Just as Roy was about to pick up the body of the blood-red spider and preserve it as a specimen, an information panel suddenly appeared in his sight. The host gains additional extraordinary abilities. Special card formation. Get a special Spider-Man card. Do you want to load it now? Looking at the information panel in front of him, Roy showed a surprised expression. Although he was a little surprised, he didn't think much about it and immediately chose to load it. Loaded cards, SR Wolverine, SR Gambit, Special Spider-Man. Unlike when he loaded the Wolverine and Gambit cards, after loading the Spider-Man card with a special prefix, no information related to Spider-Man appeared in Roy's mind. However, even without the information given away for free by the system, he knew what extraordinary abilities Spider-Man had. No matter which universe Spider-Man is from, he will possess extraordinary abilities such as Spider Physical Fitness, Adsorption Ability, Spider Sense, Self-Healing Factor, etc. As for whether you can possess unique exclusive abilities, it depends on luck. After turning off the information panel in front of him, Roy first put the body of the blood-red spider into a glass bottle, and then walked towards the bathroom. After staying in the bathroom for half an hour, he finished his shower, returned to the bedroom wrapped in a bath towel, and lay down on the bed. I don't know if it's because he possesses the superpowers of Wolverine and Gambit, but he didn't feel any discomfort after being bitten by the red spider. Not long after lying down, he fell into a dream. At this time, he didn't know that at the same time he was bitten by the blood-red spider, Gwen and Peter, who were doing homework at home, were also bitten by their respective spiders. End of this chapter. Chapter 14 Superhero. Chapter 14 Superhero. The next morning, after having breakfast at home, Roy drove towards Midtown High School. After getting up, the first thing he did was check his wrist. He breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that his wrist was fine. Although Tobey's version of Spider-Man is stronger than the other two versions of Spider-Man, he does not want to spit spider silk from his wrists like Tobey's version of Spider-Man. He prefers to use web shooters rather than generating his own silk and firing it from his wrists. After checking his wrist, he briefly tested the superpowers granted by the Spider-Man card in the bedroom. Spider Physical Strength, Suction Ability, Spider Sense. Apart from the common abilities that all Spider-Men possess, he has not yet discovered any other special abilities granted to him by the Spider-Man cards. Although he did not gain any additional exclusive abilities, he was not disappointed at all. It's good enough to have Spider-Man's universal abilities, why would he need a bicycle? After driving for about half an hour, Roy successfully arrived at Midtown High School. Not long after arriving at school, he saw Gwen, who had her long blonde hair tied into a ponytail and was wearing black boots, a grey skirt, a beige coat and a black shirt. Gwen was carrying a brown women's backpack and holding several textbooks. When Roy first saw Gwen, he didn't have any special feeling. However, as they got closer, he immediately developed a special feeling he had never had before. Spider Sense. His spider sense was triggered. Not only him, Gwen's spider sense was also triggered at the same time. Unlike Roy, who already knew that Gwen would also become the incarnation of the spider totem, after the spider sense was triggered, Gwen immediately showed a surprised expression and looked at Roy with surprise. Under Gwen's gaze, Roy walked slowly to her and said to her, "Let's find a quiet place to talk." "It is good." Gwen replied without any hesitation. In the audience seats at the school football field, Roy took out the glass bottle containing the blood-red spider from the system space, handed it to Gwen, and said slowly, "I was bitten by this spider last night, and then I gained some abilities that I didn't have before." Gwen first looked at the blood-red spider in the glass bottle. Then he took out a glass bottle of similar size from his shirt pocket. Inside the glass bottle was the black and white striped spider that Roy had seen yesterday. "I was bitten by this spider," Gwen said, frowning. "It's not just you and I who were bitten. There should be another person. There were 3 spiders that disappeared yesterday." Roy took the glass bottle that Gwen handed back and spoke slowly. Although he knew that the 3rd spider was most likely going to bite Peter, he couldn't be 100% sure before seeing Peter. Who knows if Spider Totem will choose someone else? After all, in the universe where Gwen becomes Spider-Man, Peter is injected with homemade lizard serum and becomes the Lizard Man. After hearing what Roy said, Gwen quickly said, "Why don't you look worried at all?" "Why should I worry?" Roy asked rhetorically. "Aren't you afraid of other sequelae, such as being infected with an incurable virus or disease?" Gwen continued. "It has already happened, and worrying about it won't change the outcome of us being bitten by a spider. As of now, we who have been bitten by spiders have gained superpowers that ordinary people don't have. I did a simple test this morning, and the superpowers I got are pretty good." Roy looked at Gwen calmly and spoke slowly. Gwen was silent for a few seconds, then said, "I didn't do the same test as you did. I just found that my strength has increased, my eyesight has improved, and my reaction speed has increased." "What other superpowers have you tested?" "Both the self-healing ability and physical strength have been significantly enhanced, and the ability to attach to walls, climb and walk on walls has been acquired." Roy replied immediately. Just when Gwen was about to continue speaking, their spider senses were triggered at the same time, giving a warning. Without any hesitation, they immediately turned their heads and looked in the direction of the spider sense alert. Peter. The person who triggered their spider sense was none other than Peter. Like them, Peter's spider sense was triggered and he looked at them in surprise. Peter didn't know they were also bitten by spiders, nor did he hear their conversation. He came over out of pure curiosity. "You were bitten by a spider too?" Peter asked immediately. Roy and Gwen nodded at the same time. "Class is about to start, let's talk about this after school," Roy said to Gwen and the others. "It is good," Peter and Gwen replied immediately. 3 p.m. Inside a classroom at Midtown High School. Roy, Gwen, and Peter sat in the classroom, looking at the other two in silence. There was silence for several minutes, and Roy spoke to break the depressing silence in the classroom. They had originally agreed to talk about their respective changes after school. But the morning class hadn't finished yet, and they had already finished chatting on the chat software. "Have you ever thought about being a superhero?" Roy said to Gwen and the others. Although he has no intention of becoming a superhero, he will not stop Peter and Gwen from becoming superheroes. "Superhero?" Gwen and Peter frowned at the same time after hearing his words. After a few seconds, Peter asked, "Are you talking about a superhero like Batman?" Although this is not the DC universe, there are DC comics here. When he was a child, Peter read a lot of superhero comics produced by DC. "Yes. You all have superpowers now. If you want, you can fight criminals like Batman," Roy continued. "How about you? Do you want to be a superhero?" Gwen asked immediately. "Not at all," Roy replied quickly. "Why don't you want to?" Gwen thought Roy already had the idea of becoming a superhero, so he asked her and Peter if they had the same idea. "Because my life experience tells me that being a good person is likely to lead to people pointing guns at you," Roy said seriously. As soon as he finished speaking, Gwen immediately rolled her eyes at him. "I think it's nice to be a superhero who helps other people. My uncle once told me that with great power comes great responsibility." Peter looked at Roy and said slowly, "Since you are interested, go ahead and give it a try. If you don't have anything else you want to talk about, that's it for today." With that, Roy stood up, left the classroom and headed towards the parking lot under the gaze of Peter and Gwen. At this point, he could already confirm that, as of now, Peter and Gwen, like him, had not gained any additional exclusive abilities. Not long after, he arrived at the parking lot and drove away from the school. Night. After having dinner at a restaurant near the community, Roy took a taxi to Hell's Kitchen. He knew that the Hand, the Demon Gang, the Viper Gang and other organizations were looking for him. But he still planned to come to Hell's Kitchen to do some activities, or in other words, to specifically test the abilities granted by the Spider-Man card. Of course, if he encounters an illegal transaction, he doesn't mind continuing to cheat from the cheaters. End of this chapter. Chapter 15 Power 5. Chapter 15 Power 5. No one would complain that they have too much money, and Roy is no exception. Even though he had just earned $10 million from the hand a few days ago, he had no intention of giving up this method of making money by cheating other gangs before he became a billionaire. After all, this is the most suitable and cost-effective way for him to make money at the moment. After getting off the taxi, Roy walked straight towards a nearby alley. Soon, he came to a dark alley filled with a foul smell and sewage. After arriving here, he took out a white mask with red stripes from the system space without any hesitation. After deciding to start a life of robbery in Hell's Kitchen, he bought several plain white masks on a shopping website. Although the mask was purchased, the red patterns on it were painted by him. To be precise, he drew it based on the patterns on the errand car of a protagonist from a certain Japanese anime. After putting on the mask, he looked up at the wall in front of him, raised his hands and pressed them against the wall. Then, he climbed up with a relaxed look on his face. Although the system transforms the spider superpowers granted by the spider totem into Spider-Man cards, the system's transformation does not have any effect on the spider superpowers. Not only that, because it has been transformed into a special card, he can now cancel the loading of the Spider-Man card at any time and put it into the spare card. Without much effort, Roy climbed up the wall to the roof. After reaching the roof, he did not waste any time. He ran wildly on the roof and quickly reached the edge of the roof. With a slight effort of his legs, he jumped to the roof of the residential building opposite. As Roy quickly advanced across the rooftops of buildings, a fierce cold weapon battle was taking place in another block of Hell's Kitchen. One side of the battle is the Shugokai ninja who wears blood-red ninja uniforms and uses cold weapons such as ninja swords, shuriken, sickles, and gauntlet hooks. The person they were besieging was none other than Daredevil, wearing a red uniform and holding a short stick. Unlike Roy, who lives in an upscale neighborhood in Queens and only comes to Hell's Kitchen when gangs rob gangs. Not only does Daredevil live in Hell's Kitchen, but his law firm is also in Hell's Kitchen. Plus, he busts criminals in Hell's Kitchen almost every night. The Hand is unaware of Daredevil's true identity. However, they still easily lured Daredevil out and made him fall into the trap they had prepared. At this time, there were more than 50 hand ninjas besieging Daredevil. Not only that, Sawanda and Batu, two of the 5 fingers of the Hand-in-Hand Society, also arrived at the scene. Sawanda and Batu did not participate in the siege, but stood aside and admired Daredevil's battle of the trapped beast. Compared to the Hand's ninjas, Daredevil is indeed much stronger. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4. Even though he possessed 4 senses far superior to those of ordinary people and superb close combat skills, he still could not break out of the encirclement of the Hand ninjas. I don't think your plan will work. The guy in the white mask won't come to rescue him. They are not companions at all. The gambler, who was wearing an expensive custom-made suit, spoke to Sawanda. After hearing what Botu said, Sawanda said slowly, "It doesn't matter if he doesn't come. As long as we capture him, I have 100 ways to dig out the information about the masked man from him. It doesn't matter whether we can dig out information about the masked man or not. What matters is whether we can kill him. You have also read the information we collected about the masked man. That guy has a strong self-healing ability. It is not easy to kill him." The Bato continued. "No matter how strong your self-healing ability is, you are not immortal," Sawanda said with confidence. The gambling master glanced at Sawanda and said nothing more. Time passes little by little. Under the successive sieges of the Hand ninjas, Daredevil's strength began to gradually fail, and his counterattacks became slower and slower. After seeing this, Botu said to Sawanda, "There's no need to waste time anymore. The masked man won't come. Do you want to come or should I?" "Of course I'll do it," Sawanda replied quickly. Then, he took off his coat, took the ninja sword from a hand ninja next to him, and walked towards Daredevil, who had consumed a lot of energy and had many wounds and blood on his body. He didn't need to give any orders. When he came in front of Daredevil, the hand ninjas who were besieging Daredevil quickly retreated and made enough space. After taking a look at Daredevil, Soanda didn't hesitate at all and rushed towards Daredevil with the ninja sword in hand. Ding 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 ding. The ninja sword in Soanda's hand and Daredevil's metal stick kept colliding with each other, making crisp metal collision sounds. Under Soanda's violent attack, Daredevil kept retreating. If it was a fair one-on-one fight, Soanda might not be a match for Daredevil. But at this time, Daredevil, who had little physical strength and was covered with scars, found it difficult to defeat Soanda, or even resist Soanda's attacks. He. The ninja sword in Soanda's hand kept slashing across Daredevil's body. While he could now defeat Daredevil in a short period of time, he has no intention of doing so. Before defeating Daredevil, he planned to torture him. The rooftop of a nearby residential building. Roy stood on the edge of the roof, looking down at the battle between Soanda and Daredevil. He had arrived nearby a few minutes ago. However, he did not immediately help Daredevil, but stood on the roof and watched the battle between Daredevil and the hand ninja with interest. After seeing Daredevil being stabbed 7 or 8 times by Soanda, he took his right foot and fell from the roof. After completing a 360-degree turn in the air, he fell to the ground as lightly as a falling leaf. The next second, he took out a card from the system space. Recharge. Without any hesitation, he immediately used the King of Cards superpowers and charged the cards in an instant. The cards that were infused with energy glowed with purple light like electricity. He just threw the card with purple light and it flew towards Soanda, who was torturing Daredevil like a bullet. Bang! The card flying at high speed accurately hit the ninja sword in Soanda's hand, and the energy contained in the card suddenly exploded. The impact force generated by the explosion easily knocked the ninja sword away and caused obvious pain in the base of Soanda's right hand. This was the first time Roy showed this superpower in front of other people. The result was just as he expected. The cards injected with energy showed great power. The moment the explosion sounded, whether it was Soanda, Batu, Daredevil or other hand ninjas, their eyes fell on Roy at the first moment. Roy didn't pay attention to their gazes, nor did he continue to use the King of Cards superpowers or release the adamantium bone claws. Under the gazes of Soanda, Batu, and others, he suddenly exerted force with his legs and came in front of a hand ninja as if charging. Before the Shugokai ninja could react, his right fist hit the opponent's chest. Bang! The Shugokai ninja who was hit in the chest immediately felt the terrifying force, as if he was hit head-on by a speeding car, and flew backwards dozens of meters in an instant. Is his power so great? After seeing this scene, Soanda and Batu both showed surprised expressions. Although Daredevil couldn't see it with his eyes, he saw in his own way the scene where Roy punched the hand ninja dozens of meters away, and an expression of surprise appeared on his face. According to the official ability values, Spider-Man and Wolverine both have a strength value of 4. People's physiques cannot be generalized. The same is true for a strength value of 4. With the same strength of 4, some people can only lift objects weighing 800 pounds, while others can lift objects weighing 25 tons. Although both have a power of 4, Spider-Man's strength is obviously much stronger than Wolverine's. In other words, Wolverine is at the lower limit of the power 4, while Spider-Man is at the upper limit of the power 4. Normally, Spider-Man can easily lift objects weighing 15 to 25 tons. At some critical moments, Spider-Man can even lift objects weighing more than 100 tons. Roy had not specifically tested his current strength limit, but his intuition told him that his strength limit was most likely over 25 tons and had reached strength 5, which was between 25 and 75 tons. He now has 3 cards loaded. Even if the power boost from Wolverine and Gambit cards isn't as great as that from Spider-Man cards, they can still allow his power stat to reach 5. After all, the power brought by the Spider-Man card is almost the upper limit of power 4. End of this chapter. Chapter 16 You Owe Me a Life. Chapter 16 You Owe Me a Life. After knocking the hand ninja away with one punch, Roy did not test his strength with other hand ninjas. Adamantium bone claws. Without any hesitation, he immediately released his sharp and sturdy adamantium claws. After seeing him release the adamantium bone claws, Soanda and Batu immediately ordered the hand ninjas on the scene to besiege him. The next second, these Shiukai ninjas rushed towards Roy with weapons in their hands, fearlessly and without fear of death, like moths to a flame. Of course Roy would not be polite to these hand ninjas. Instead of retreating, he advanced and rushed towards the attacking hand ninjas. He. Roy rushed into the crowd like a hungry wolf into a flock of sheep, frantically hunting the surrounding hand ninjas. Although he was alone now, he quickly gained the absolute upper hand. In front of the adamantium bone claws that were so sharp that they seemed to be cheats, the weapons used by these Shiukai ninjas were as fragile as paper. Not to mention resisting Roy's adamantium claws, their weapons were chopped off when they touched the adamantium claws without Roy having to put in any effort. As for their bodies, there is no need to mention it. Unlike in the comics, the hand ninja killed by Roy did not turn into ashes and disappear without a trace, but turned into broken limbs scattered on the ground like ordinary people. Blood splattered and debris scattered all over the ground. The strong smell of blood quickly spread in the night wind. After seeing Roy unilaterally slaughtering the Tsubasa ninjas like chopping vegetables and melons, Soanda and Batu's expressions became extremely ugly. They knew Roy was stronger than Daredevil, but they didn't expect Roy to be so much stronger than Daredevil. The hand ninjas who had pushed Daredevil to his limit were like a group of defenseless babies in front of Roy. Although they didn't know why Roy was so strong, Soanda and Batu didn't think much about it. They immediately took the ninja swords from the surrounding hand ninjas and attacked Roy. In just less than a minute, more than 30 Shiukai ninjas died at Roy's hands. If they didn't take action, the hand ninjas they brought with them would soon be slaughtered by Roy. Soon, Soanda and Batu came in front of Roy and attacked him from different angles in perfect harmony. Compared with the hand ninjas, Soanda and Batu are much stronger in terms of individual strength and tacit understanding. But even so, their combined efforts still did not pose any threat to Roy. Is this the Kung Fu you learned in Kunlun? After easily avoiding the ninja swords in Soanda and Batu's hands, Roy said to the two of them. Does he know Kunlun? After hearing Roy's words, Soanda and Batu immediately showed uncontrollable shock on their faces. As traders of Kunlun, what they worried most was that their whereabouts would be discovered by the people of Kunlun. Although they are now much stronger than when they defected from Kunlun, they still do not have the confidence to compete with Kunlun. In the eyes of others, they are the leaders of the hand, possess considerable strength, and control a notorious group of crazy ninja killers. But only they themselves know that neither they, nor the hand, nor the original demon beast that the hand believes in, can resist Kunlun. Otherwise, they would not have moved away from Asia and run to America across the ocean to develop their power. Soanda and Batu immediately stepped back several meters and looked at him vigilantly. Are you from Kunlun? Soanda said to Roy. No, I have nothing to do with Kunlun. Roy replied. Although he was telling the truth, it was obvious that neither Soanda nor Batu believed him. Not only that, a guess popped up in their minds, which seemed to them to be the truth. Roy was sent by Kunlun to capture them. It is precisely because of this that he came to cause trouble for the hand. Otherwise, he would not know the existence of Kunlun, let alone know that they were traders of Kunlun. It was normal for Soanda and the gambler to have such a guess, because apart from this, they could not think of any other reason. After seeing the expressions of disbelief on Soanda and Batu's faces, Roy stopped talking, took a deep breath, and rushed towards the two of them. Soanda and the gambler did not sit there and wait for death, but immediately circulated the energy in their bodies. As chi circulates, their strength, speed, stamina, reaction, etc. are significantly enhanced. As former members of Kunlun, they all mastered Kunlun's extraordinary ability Qi. Although they seldom use it in normal times, and in the past few hundred years of decadent life, they have abandoned their martial arts to a certain extent. But no matter what, they are also superhumans. However, this still did not change the ending for both of them. If Roy just wanted to witness Kunlun's martial arts, he only defended and did not attack, giving the two of them the opportunity to attack to their heart's content. Now that he knew what Kunlun's martial arts were all about, he didn't plan to waste any more time. With faster speed and more agile movements, Roy avoided Sawanda's attack and went behind him like a ghost. Laugh! The adamantium bone claw pierced through Sawanda's back, piercing the opponent's heart, and the sharp claw tip pierced out of his chest. After piercing Sawanda's heart, Roy did not stop there, and swung his left hand out like lightning. Laugh! The sharp adamantium claws cut off Sawanda's neck easily as if they were cutting through a cream cake. Sawanda's head flew high and blood spurted out from the broken carotid artery like water. After killing Sawanda, Roy turned quickly and attacked the gambler beside him. Batu instinctively raised the ninja sword in his hand, trying to block the attacking adamantium bone claws. Without any suspense, the ninja sword in the Batu's hand broke with a clang, and the adamantium bone claws flashed across his body like lightning. Compared with Sawanda, whose head was chopped off, the gambler's fate was even more miserable. The adamantium claws in Roy's hands slashed across the gambler's body from the shoulders, one in front and one behind, cutting him into two bloody pieces. Get it? Although the scene was a bit bloody, Roy didn't take it seriously at all. After taking a look at the remains of Sawanda and Batu, he turned and attacked the remaining hand ninjas. I don't know if the hand has a rule that prohibits escape, or if these hand ninjas have been brainwashed to the point of being irrational. After seeing Roy kill Sawanda and Batu, the remaining hand ninjas not only did not retreat, but rushed forward and besieged him. Although the remaining hand ninjas showed their courage and fearlessness, their counterattack did not cause Roy any trouble, but instead saved Roy the effort of chasing them. In just a few dozen seconds, Roy slaughtered all the Shikai ninjas at the scene. You owe me a life. After retracting the adamantium claws into his body, Roy turned and said to Daredevil, who was sitting on the ground and leaning against the wall. Daredevil said nothing, but nodded, agreeing with Roy's words. Roy ignored Daredevil and walked slowly to the wreckage of Sawanda and Batu. He took out a bucket of gasoline from the system space and poured the gasoline on their wreckage. He then pulled out a Zippo lighter and ignited the gasoline-soaked wreckage. He was not clear on the specifics of how dragon bones resurrected the dead. But his intuition told him that it would be better to burn the bodies of Sawanda and Batu. Of course it would be best if we could prevent Sawanda and Batu from being resurrected. If that doesn't work, destroying their bodies would also make it more difficult to resurrect them. After setting fire to the bodies of Sawanda and Batu, Roy left without looking back. As for how the injured Daredevil would return, that was not a problem he needed to consider. End of this chapter. Chapter 17 Nine-Headed Snake. Chapter 17 Hydra. Noon the next day. Midtown High School. After finishing lunch in the cafeteria, Roy, Peter, and Gwen came to the spectator stands at the football stadium. After school yesterday, I designed a uniform suitable for us based on the superhero uniforms in DC Comics. After saying that, Peter took out a draft book from his school bag, opened it, and handed it to Roy. Roy took the draft book handed to him by Peter, took a look at it, and immediately said, I don't have any idea of becoming a superhero. You two can just discuss the issue of subduing it. After saying that, he handed the draft book to Gwen beside him. I don't know if it's a coincidence or something else, but the uniform Peter designed is not much different from the Spider-Man uniform he remembered. Aside from the slightly different colors, everything else, such as the spider logo on the chest, the shape of the eyes, the spider webs on the uniform, etc., were pretty much the same as he remembered. When Gwen took the draft book, Peter immediately looked at Gwen expectantly, waiting for Gwen's answer. After a few seconds, Gwen said softly, I personally don't like this type of uniform. After hearing Gwen's answer, a look of loss immediately appeared on Peter's face. When Roy first came to this world, he didn't know who the girl Peter liked was. After interacting with Peter, Harry, and others for a while, he finally found out. The person Peter likes now is not Gwen, nor Mary Jane, nor Michelle Jones, but Liz Toombs from the next class. Just like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Liz Toombs is a black chick. Roy is not sure yet whether her father Adrian Toombs has become the supervillain Vulture. However, from the information he had obtained, Adrian should not have become a Vulture yet, but an ordinary person who runs a recycling company. According to Harry, Peter started to like Lizzie Toombs after he entered high school. As for why Peter fell in love with someone else as soon as he entered high school and no longer liked Mary Jane, Harry was not very clear. Gwen handed the draft book in her hand back to Peter and continued, I haven't decided yet whether I want to become a so-called superhero to fight criminals. Besides, if I were to do it, I'd design my own uniforms. Peter took the draft book disappointedly, put it back into his backpack, and said slowly, well, I was planning on discussing other equipment and how to combat criminals with you. Since you are not interested now, let's talk about it later. As soon as he finished speaking, Roy took out a design drawing he had drawn last night from the system space. The design he drew was none other than the design of the spider web launcher. Although the original body was not as smart as Peter, compared with ordinary high school students, the original body was undoubtedly an academic master. More importantly, Roy knew that the web shooter was the best equipment for Spider-Man. This is the spider web launcher I designed. When you wear it on your wrist, you can shoot spider silk like a spider. I have almost designed the rest of the launcher. Now there's only the problem of the spider silk. I searched online and found that the biological cable newly launched by the Osborn Group some time ago can be used as spider silk. A small ball the size of a finger can hold hundreds of meters of lightweight cable. In addition to the Osborn Group's bio cables, we could also consider developing our own spider silk solution. But it is difficult to develop it on your own, which is beyond my ability. If you have the ability, you can try to develop a spider silk solution that meets the needs. After that, Roy handed the design of the spider web shooter to Peter. The mechanical part of the spider web launcher is not difficult and can be made as long as you have a certain amount of mechanical engineering knowledge. The really difficult part is the spider silk. Peter took the blueprint for the web shooter and quickly looked through it. After reading the design in detail, he said to Roy, how did you come up with this? Also, didn't you say you didn't want to be a superhero? A person who doesn't want to be a superhero won't be in the mood to develop and design equipment. Not only Peter, but Gwen was now looking at him with the same puzzled look. Just because I don't want to be a superhero doesn't mean I don't need equipment. These are two different things. Roy replied. Although he was telling the truth, the idea of him wanting to be a superhero still popped up in Peter and Gwen's minds. I'll leave it to you to perfect the web shooters and develop the silk solution. If you can't develop a spider silk solution that meets your needs, consider purchasing the biological cables from the Osborn Group. After saying that, Roy stood up and left the audience under the gaze of Peter and Gwen. When he disappeared from sight, Peter said to Gwen, let's go back to. Gwen nodded. Hell's Kitchen. A secret base of the hand. Mrs. Gao, Alexandra, and Murakami stood beside the table in the room. No one spoke, and their faces were expressionless as they looked at the remains of the body on the table. To be precise, Saonda and the other man were torn into pieces and burned into charred remains. After a few dozen seconds, Madame Gao, who looked old and like a kind old lady, said, after being burned like this, even with the dragon bones, there is no way to revive them. Only 3 of the 5 fingers of the hand will remain. Although dragon bones have the ability to bring the dead back to life, there are many limitations to using dragon bones to revive the dead. One of them is that the body of the deceased cannot be damaged too badly. The people are already dead, but you deliberately burn their bodies like this. Don't you think this is a bit strange? Murakami, who was wearing a white kimono and a samurai sword on his waist, said in a cold tone. You mean that masked man is from Kunlun? Alexandra asked immediately. Except that he is from Kunlun, I can't think of any other reason. He burned the bodies of Saonda and the other two. It's obvious that he didn't want us to use the dragon bones to revive them. Murakami continued. After hearing his words, Alexandra and Mrs. Gao immediately frowned. After knowing that the bodies of Saonda and Bata were burned to charcoal, they also had such doubts. But they still don't think Roy is from Kunlun. As for the reason, it's simple. The people of Kunlun are not so bloodthirsty. After a silence of more than 10 seconds, Madame Gao said seriously, whether he is from Kunlun or not, we cannot let him live any longer. As long as he's alive, the reputation of the hand will never be restored, and outsiders will think that the hand is just a facade and weak and can be bullied. I suggest waking up Black Sky and letting him deal with him. Wake up Black Sky! As soon as Mrs. Gao finished speaking, Murakami and Alexandra's expressions became extremely serious. Although Black Sky is the hand's most powerful weapon, they do not want to awaken Black Sky unless necessary. Unlike ordinary ninjas who have been brainwashed to the point of being no different from fanatics, Kurosotra will not obey their orders 100%. In other words, Black Space is a double-edged sword. If anything goes wrong, Black Sky will go from being the hand's most powerful weapon to being their enemy. After thinking carefully, Murakami said slowly, I don't agree to wake up Hei Kong now. The situation is not serious enough to need to wake up Hei Kong. I don't agree with awakening Black Sky either. Alexandra then said. If you don't wake up Hei Kong, do you want to deal with him yourself? You all know what happened to Saonda and Bata without me telling you. If you want to go down and accompany them too, I won't stop you. Mrs. Gao said quickly. As soon as she finished speaking, Murakami spoke up, no, we don't need to deal with him ourselves. I know an organization that is very interested in para-humans. We just need to tell them that the masked man is a superhuman, and then wait and see what happens. Although Murakami did not say the name of the organization, Mrs. Gao and Alexandra immediately guessed which organization he was talking about. Hydra. The organization Murakami was talking about was none other than Hydra. End of this chapter. Chapter 18 Professor Lizard. Chapter 18 Professor Lizard. Mrs. Gao first exchanged glances with Alexandra, then said to Murakami, when did you cooperate with Hydra? You can cooperate with Kingpin, and I can certainly look for other allies. Murakami was not surprised that Mrs. Gao and Alexandra could guess that the organization he was talking about was Hydra, and he spoke slowly. Although the 5 of them escaped from Kunlun together and joined forces to establish the Hand, their relationship was not as good as rumored by the outside world. In other words, their relationship was indeed very good when they just defected from Kunlun. As time went by, the conflicts between them increased. Take the present for example. After knowing that Saonda and Bata were killed, they did not feel any sadness or any thoughts of avenging Saonda and Batu. After hearing Murakami's answer, Mrs. Gao continued, it is not the Hand's style to use the power of other organizations to deal with the enemy. It doesn't matter whether we use the power of other organizations or not. What matters is whether we can kill the masked man. Murakami replied immediately. Of course he knew that doing so would damage the reputation of the Hand. But compared to awakening Black Sky, he would rather let the Hand lose some reputation. The last time they sealed Black Sky, they paid a heavy price, and he doesn't want to do it again. Let's contact Hydra and let Hydra deal with the masked man. It's better than letting us take risks on our own. Alexandra said slowly. After seeing Alexandra support Murakami, Mrs. Gao said nothing more and nodded. Now that we have reached a consensus, the masked man will be handed over to Hydra. After saying that, Murakami left the room without looking back. Midtown High School. Roy sat in the classroom, thinking about whether he should go to Hell's Kitchen again to kill Mrs. Gao and the other two, and take the dragon bones in their hands for himself. Although he knew that there was a complete dragon skeleton underground in Midtown Manhattan, he did not have the ability to break the seal. In other words, if he wanted the dragon bone, he could only snatch it from Mrs. Gao and the others. Just as he was thinking about whether to go there tonight or in a few days, Mary Jane, who was sitting on his right, whispered, "Will you go to Coney Island Beach with me after school? I bought a very sexy swimsuit yesterday." "A very sexy swimsuit?" After hearing what Mary Jane said, Roy turned and looked at her. He didn't think too long before saying to Mary Jane, "Okay. Although I don't know how sexy the swimsuit Mary Jane bought yesterday is, a trip to Coney Island Beach after school won't waste much time." Even if he wanted to rob Mrs. Gao and the others of their dragon bones, he didn't have to go to Hell's Kitchen right after school. Before grabbing the dragon bone, it is also a good idea to do some activities that make people feel happy physically and mentally. 2:45 p.m. The school bell rang on time. Roy drives Mary Jane to Coney Island. Coney Island is located in Brooklyn, and its beach facing the Atlantic Ocean is the closest recreational beach to downtown New York City. There are 2 large amusement parks on the beach, with more than 40 types of roller coasters and an extra-large Ferris wheel. In addition to the abundant recreational facilities, Coney Island Beach is also a great place to enjoy the sunset. After driving for almost an hour, Roy and Mary Jane finally arrived at Coney Island Beach. Once they reached the beach, Mary Jane, who had been sitting in the passenger seat, climbed into the back seat. Then, she took off her clothes in front of Roy and changed into a swimsuit. Mary Jane was right, the swimsuit she bought yesterday was indeed very sexy. The minimal amount of fabric perfectly showed off Mary Jane's sexy figure. After watching Mary Jane changing into her swimsuit from a close distance, Roy suddenly felt that he was a little too angry today. After taking a look at the busy parking lot, he restarted the car. "What happened?" Mary Jane asked, confused. "Park somewhere else," Roy replied. "What's here?" Before she could finish her words, Mary Jane reacted and an alluring blush appeared on her face. After driving around the parking lot for a few minutes, Roy finally found a suitable parking spot. A remote corner with no pedestrians and no other vehicles around, and walls in front and on the left. After parking the car, Roy immediately came to the back seat. As a large pickup truck, the rear seat of the Ford Raptor is very spacious, with much more room for movement than ordinary cars and SUVs. Not long after, sounds inappropriate for children were heard in the car and the body of the car began to shake irregularly. Although they didn't have to worry too much about being discovered when playing poker in this place, Roy and Mary Jane didn't play poker in the car for too long. Anyway, this is an open-air parking lot and it's still daytime. After playing for less than half an hour, Roy and Mary Jane ended the card game. After tidying up their clothes, they got out of the car and walked towards the beach. It's not a holiday or a weekend, but there are still many tourists on Coney Island Beach. Just as they were about to reach the beach, Roy suddenly stopped. "What happened?" Mary Jane asked quickly. Roy did not answer, but turned to look at the playground at his 5 o'clock position. Just now, his spider sense suddenly gave a warning, causing the hair on his hands to stand up. When the spider sense gave the warning, the first thing that flashed through Roy's mind was that the hand was out to take revenge on him. Although he has offended many New York gangs in the past month. But the only one who suffered the greatest loss and had a chance of discovering his whereabouts was the hand. As for ordinary gangs such as the Demon Gang, the Viper Gang, the Magic Gang, etc., he didn't think they had the ability to discover his whereabouts. Seeing that Roy didn't answer her, Mary Jane turned her head and looked towards the playground. After a few seconds, they saw a large group of tourists running out of the amusement park. Although we don't know what happened inside the amusement park, judging from the panicked and frightened expressions of the tourists, something serious must have happened inside the amusement park. Go back to the car first, I'll go over and take a look. Roy said to Mary Jane. I will go with you. Mary Jane said quickly. No, just wait for me in the car, I'll be back soon. After saying that, without waiting for Mary Jane to answer, Roy walked towards the playground. It wasn't long before he arrived inside the amusement park and saw a giant creature that was familiar to him, but one he hadn't seen in person since crossing over to this world. It was a giant humanoid lizard over 2 meters tall with green skin. Professor Lizard. The first time he saw the other person, information about Professor Lizard flashed through Roy's mind. At this time, Professor Lizard was wearing a dirty white coat with many holes, attacking the enemies around him like a beast. His enemies were not ordinary tourists in the amusement park, but a group of fully armed soldiers wearing black combat uniforms. These soldiers surrounded Professor Lizard in small groups, firing tranquilizer bullets from their rifles. In addition to rifles that fire tranquilizer bullets, some soldiers carry less lethal weapons such as stun guns and net shooters. Apparently, their mission is to capture Professor Lizard alive. After discovering that these soldiers were preparing to capture Professor Lizard alive, Roy's first reaction was that these soldiers were from SHIELD. But soon, he found out that he was wrong. These soldiers are not from SHIELD. He didn't see any S.H.I.E.L.D. related symbols on these soldiers. In addition, around Professor Lizard and the soldiers, there were many tourists who were unconscious after being hit by anesthetic bullets. In other words, those tourists who failed to run away immediately were stopped by the soldiers using tranquilizer guns to prevent theft. Roy didn't know which organization these soldiers belonged to, but he quickly retracted his gaze and turned to walk towards the parking lot. Although he recognized Professor Lizard, he had no intention of helping him. He came here just to see what was going on here. However, after only a few steps, his spider reflexes gave him a warning. At the same time, he felt as if time was slowed down hundreds of times and everything around him became extremely clear. Without any hesitation, he immediately took a step to the right. The next second, several tranquilizer bullets flew past his original position. End of this chapter. Chapter 19, Death of Professor Lizard. Chapter 19, Death of Professor Lizard. Actually escaped? After seeing Roy, who had his back to him, avoid the tranquilizer bullet as if he had predicted the attack, the soldier who shot at him immediately frowned. His current task is not to capture Professor Lizard, but to knock down the irrelevant people around him to prevent someone from taking pictures of the scene with a mobile phone and uploading it to the internet. Although he didn't know who Roy was, after seeing Roy dodge the tranquilizer bullet behind him miraculously, the soldier turned the gun around without any hesitation and tried to aim at Roy again. However, before he could aim at Roy again, a playing card came in front of him at an astonishing speed and hit his head accurately. Bang! The moment it hit the helmet, the seemingly harmless playing card exploded with extraordinary power, and the energy contained in the playing card suddenly burst out. Without any suspense, the soldier who was hit on the head by the playing card was immediately knocked flying and fell to the ground with a thud. Blood flowed out of the dented helmet. The sudden explosion immediately attracted the attention of other soldiers. Except for a small number of soldiers who were attacking Professor Lizard, the other soldiers' eyes were on Roy. Roy didn't care about their looks and sighed helplessly. Then, under the watchful eyes of these soldiers, the adamantium bone claws were released. Until now, he still doesn't know which organization these soldiers belong to. But there was one thing he was sure of. That is, the organization that sent these soldiers to capture Professor Lizard is definitely not a just organization. This can be seen from the fact that these soldiers would shoot at innocent tourists. Although they used tranquilizer bullets, it still cannot change the fact that they did not care about the safety of innocent tourists. This also means that these soldiers are not good people. Roy released the adamantium bone claws without any hesitation. He exerted force with his legs and shot towards the soldier closest to him. The soldiers around him immediately pulled the trigger and fired at him wildly. Boo hoo 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 hoo. The anesthetic bullets with strong anesthetic effects flew towards Roy at a high speed like a rainstorm. Roy didn't care about the anesthetic bullets and came to the soldier in the rain of bullets. Although he was wearing a bulletproof vest, in front of the extremely sharp adamantium bone claws, the bulletproof vest worn by this soldier was as thin as paper. Laugh. The adamantium bone claws easily penetrated into the opponent's chest and pierced the heart, and the claw tips shining with cold light drilled out from the back. After killing this soldier, Roy wasted no time and immediately attacked the second soldier. He 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 he. Roy continued to wave his adamantium claws, reaping the lives of these soldiers like the god of death. There were more than 30 soldiers who captured Professor Lizard. In less than a minute, more than 20 soldiers died at his hands. While Roy was efficiently hunting down these soldiers, Professor Lizard was not idle either and began a frantic counterattack. It didn't take long before the more than 30 fully armed soldiers were killed by them. Professor Lizard stood about 20 to 30 meters away, glanced at Roy, said nothing, and immediately turned and walked towards the nearby sewer manhole. Soon, he arrived at the sewer manhole. Just as he was about to lift the manhole cover and enter the sewer, a playing card shining with purple light hit his back. Bang! The energy on the playing cards suddenly exploded. The impact, which was enough to seriously injure an ordinary person, did not cause any noticeable damage to Professor Lizard. It only caused him to lose his balance and stagger to the ground. After falling to the ground, Professor Lizard quickly stood up and looked at Roy with anger on his face. I didn't expect you to repay me, but I saved your life after all. It's really rude of you not to even say a word of thanks. Roy didn't take Professor Lizard's anger to heart and walked towards Professor Lizard while speaking. Although he had not yet fought with Professor Lizard, after witnessing the fighting power displayed by Professor Lizard, he knew that Professor Lizard was definitely not his opponent. What exactly do you want to do? The professor said quickly, glaring at Roy. Tell me who these guys are and I'll let you go. Roy looked at Professor Lizard calmly. I don't know. Professor Lizard replied immediately. At the same time, his legs were slightly bent, ready for battle. I'm not negotiating with you anymore, nor am I begging you. I'm giving you a piece of advice. You'd better tell me everything you know. Otherwise, not only will they die here, but you will too. Roy wasn't joking with Professor Lizard, he was serious. If Professor Lizard could not provide him with valuable information, he would not mind killing Professor Lizard as well. Professor Lizard saw his appearance and also saw him using the adamantium bone claws, and was the only eyewitness at the scene. Professor Lizard didn't say anything. He used all 4 limbs and ran towards Roy like a real lizard and quickly came in front of Roy. As Roy watched, Professor Lizard raised his right claw and grabbed his head with lightning. From an ordinary person's perspective, Professor Lizard is indeed very fast. But to Roy, Professor Lizard's speed was not fast enough. He didn't dodge or step back. When Professor Lizard's right claw came in front of him and was about to grab his head, he raised his right hand and waved it casually. Laugh. The adamantium bone claw flashed across Professor Lizard's right arm like lightning, cutting off his right arm. After cutting off Professor Lizard's right arm, Roy did not stop and continued to swing his hands. Shishiki. The adamantium bone claws kept scratching Professor Lizard's body, cutting off his left arm, legs, and tail. Intense pain instantly spread throughout Professor Lizard's body, and he fell to the ground uncontrollably. Although he possesses amazing regenerative abilities, having his limbs and tail cut off can still cause him pain. I'm a very impatient person. If you don't speak before I hear the sirens, I'm going to chop your head off. As soon as he finished speaking, Roy swung his adamantium claws again and cut off Professor Lizard's limbs that had not yet fully regenerated. After hearing Roy's words, Professor Lizard's expression suddenly became extremely ugly. Although he hadn't tested it, he knew that the super regenerative abilities granted by the lizard serum would not likely allow him to grow a new head. After a few seconds of silence, Professor Lizard said, Hydra. They are Hydra's people. Hydra? Roy frowned slightly. How do you know they are from Hydra? Roy asked Professor Lizard. Their commander told me to surrender himself when he persuaded me to do so. He said that if I went back with them, not only would they not harm me, but they would also support my research. Professor Lizard replied quickly. After carefully observing Professor Lizard for a few seconds, Roy slowly said, I forgot to tell you just now, my hearing is much better than that of ordinary people. I heard the sirens before you opened your mouth. What? Professor Lizard was stunned for a moment. You do not laugh. Before Professor Lizard could finish his words, the adamantium claw slashed across his neck and chopped off his head. After his head was cut off, Professor Lizard's limbs and tail, which were regenerating rapidly, stopped growing immediately. After taking a look at Professor Lizard's body, Roy didn't waste any more time and turned to leave the amusement park. Instead of leaving the playground through the main gate, he climbed over the wall and left the playground. Not only that, he changed into clean clothes and cleaned the blood off his hands and face before returning to the parking lot. End of this chapter. Chapter 20 Night Attack. Chapter 20 Night Attack. Parking lot. Mary Jane, wearing a blue bikini, stood next to Roy's Ford Raptor, looking toward the entrance to the parking lot from time to time. Just as she was thinking about whether to go find Roy, Roy appeared in her sight and walked straight towards her. When she saw Roy changed his clothes, a puzzled expression immediately appeared on her face. Why did you change your clothes? Where did you get them? Did you just buy them? Mary Jane asked Roy. Well, the clothes I wore before are dirty. Roy answered casually. Although Mary Jane had played poker with him many times, he had never shown the existence of the system space in front of Mary Jane, nor had he shown his adamantium bone claws and other superpowers in front of her. Mary Jane's intuition told her that things were not that simple, but she did not intend to continue asking questions. Instead, she chose to believe Roy's explanation. In a way, she is a very considerate person. Although her academic performance is not as good as Gwen's, it is easy to get along with her because she knows what to ask and what not to ask. As Mary Jane changed back into her old clothes in the back seat, Roy drove out of the parking lot and headed toward Queens. After an hour. An ordinary neighborhood in Queens. Roy dropped Mary Jane off at her doorstep. Then I'll go back first. See you at school tomorrow. Mary Jane said to Roy. Ah. Roy nodded. After hearing his answer, Mary Jane unbuckled her seatbelt, leaned over, and kissed him on the cheek. After doing all this, she opened the car door, got out and went home. After watching Mary Jane return home, Roy drove away from the community. He did not drive home immediately. After leaving Mary Jane's neighborhood, he pulled over to the side of the road and picked up his phone. Soon, he saw relevant on-site reports of the amusement park case on the internet. Although the police have not released any information yet, the news that a lizard monster appeared in the amusement park has become a hot search on major social media and news websites. Lizard monster. Mysterious army. After browsing the internet for more than 10 minutes and realizing that people and the media were focusing on these two things, he put down his phone and continued driving home. Although the appearance of Professor Lizard and Hydra was completely beyond his expectations, he did not take it too seriously. On the first day he traveled to this world, he was mentally prepared to be targeted by organizations such as SHIELD and Hydra. Unless he does not use the superpowers granted by the cards, it is only a matter of time before he is targeted by SHIELD and Hydra. Night. After having dinner at a Chinese restaurant near the community, Roy took a taxi to Hell's Kitchen. Although some unexpected things happened this afternoon, he not only did not give up his plan to kill Mrs. Gao and others and steal the dragon bones, but also decided to take action tonight. The New York police may not be able to connect the killings at the playground to the masked man in Hell's Kitchen. But Hydra certainly can. In order to avoid the situation where Hydra and the Hand joined forces to deal with him, he decided to deal with the Hand first. At this time, he didn't know that Hydra had already received the information sent by Murakami before school was over at Central City High School, the Hand headquarters. Unlike traditional gangs such as the Devil's Gang and the Magic Gang, the Hand did not place its headquarters in a manor or factory, but in a commercial building. Inside a reception room on the top floor of the building. In addition to Murakami, Mrs. Gao, and Alexandra, there were 3 men in black combat uniforms in the reception room. These 3 men in black combat uniforms are not from the Hand, but superhumans sent by Hydra to assist the Hand in capturing the masked man. In addition to them, there were more than 70 Hydra soldiers with live ammunition who followed them into the building. At the beginning, Hydra only sent 1 superhuman and more than 20 soldiers. After knowing that the team trying to capture Professor Lizard was completely wiped out, Hydra sent 2 more superhumans and more than 40 soldiers. New York police still don't know who went on a killing spree at the amusement park. But Hydra already knew. Several Hydra soldiers reported the situation on the scene via radio before they died. Both hands have sharp steel claws. Immune to the effects of tranquilizer bullets. Although the information reported by those Hydra soldiers was not much, it was enough for Hydra to draw a conclusion. Neither the 3 Murakami people nor the 3 superhumans sent by Hydra spoke a word. The entire reception room was extremely quiet. Time passes little by little. I don't know how much time had passed, but first there were several huge explosions downstairs, followed by intense gunfire. After hearing the gunshots and explosions coming from downstairs, Murakami and others immediately got up and walked to the huge floor-to-ceiling window of the reception room and looked downstairs. Although the sounds of gunfire and explosions were evident, they saw no intruders, only the bodies of the Hand ninjas and Hydra soldiers on the building's plaza. The next second, the door of the reception room was pushed open, and a Shikai ninja walked in. He bowed to the 3 Murakami people and said quickly, "The masked man with steel claws on both hands has arrived, and he has entered the lobby on the 1st floor. Stop him, we'll go down now." Murakami said immediately. The lobby on the 1st floor of the building. Roy, wearing a white mask with red stripes, went on a killing spree in the lobby. Although he had never been here before, he knew early on that this was the headquarters of the Hand. This information is easily found in the dark web forums of the New York underworld. After throwing a few energy-infused playing cards at the door of the building, or rather, when the Hydra soldiers began to shoot back, Roy realized that his luck was a bit bad tonight. He thought he only had to deal with the Hand tonight and not Hydra. It turned out that he had thought it a little too simple. Unlike the Hydra soldiers in the amusement park, these Hydra soldiers in the building not only wear combat uniforms with the Hydra logo, but also have the Hydra logo on their helmets. Although it was a little unexpected, Roy did not waste time thinking about it. He directly released the adamantium bone claws and began to attack without defending. With the extraordinary abilities granted by the Wolverine and Spider-Man cards, he easily killed the Hand ninjas and Hydra soldiers outside the building, entered the building, and started a killing spree in the lobby on the 1st floor. There were many Hand ninjas and Hydra soldiers in the lobby, but they did not pose any threat to Roy. Even though they had an absolute numerical advantage, they couldn't hold out for long in front of Roy, who was like a berserker. Before the elevator that Murakami and his companions were riding reached the 1st floor, Roy had already cleared out the Hand ninjas and Hydra soldiers in the lobby. The originally neat and clean lobby has now completely changed. Broken limbs and arms and broken weapons were scattered all over the ground, and traces of bullets and explosions were everywhere. The blood dyed the ground red, and the strong smell of blood enveloped the entire lobby. After killing the Hand ninjas and Hydra soldiers in the lobby, Roy did not go to the elevator, but stood in the lobby and waited patiently. Not long after, Murakami and his group appeared in his sight. Murakami, wearing a white kimono and a samurai sword at his waist. Mrs. Gao, who looks old and kind, holds a cane in her hand. Alexandra, wearing a black women's suit and holding a samurai sword in her right hand. Roy's gaze did not stay on Murakami and the other two for too long. With just a quick glance at them, his eyes landed on the 3 Hydra para-humans dressed in black combat uniforms. Roy didn't know them, but he knew that these 3 guys were not ordinary people. Because they were not armed like other Hydra soldiers. To be exact, they had no weapons at all. End of this chapter. Like, and subscribe.